Chapter 691. Undead Book. His eyes cast downward, facing Osiris's seemingly casual inquiry. Ra appeared to still be focused on the mortal realm's situation. The fall of 4 pillar gods in succession brought direct, yet more potential impacts. The vermin beasts summoned by Set were mostly exterminated, with the remainder scattering and fleeing. After a futile resistance for a while, with the fall of the sky goddess and lake goddess Tefnut, Hemenu's climate underwent a permanent strange change. This was unlike the natural disasters under the control of the gods previously, which, though terrifying, were orderly and with clear objectives. But with the death of the deities, the origin they represented was extracted, and even the world cycle seemed to be affected as a result. Frogs and flies fled from the lakes and swamps, while mosquitoes spread diseases everywhere. Ra already foresaw that another kind of catastrophe would run rampant on the mortal world, the earth covered with corpses, indifferent to race and status. This was irreversible unless the world replenished its missing parts and gave birth to corresponding deities anew, or if he ended in complete failure, becoming part of another world. Otherwise, there was no possibility of halting all this. However, Ra did not particularly care. The disaster appearing fearsomely in the mortal realm actually caused more of Hemenu's strength to gradually tilt downwards. Moreover, in the short term, these effects were not enough to collapse the core of the Egyptian dynasty. This was already sufficient. He had sheltered the Egyptians through long ages, helping them build a prosperous dynasty. Now was the time for them to repay him. It wasn't only these mortals. Even these deities should do the same. The world knew that Ra defeated the previous god of sun, also Hemenu's original deity, Atum, becoming the new sun. Yet how many remembered that, in fact, most of the 9 pillars spirit already existed in that era? They were born because of the original deities, and the title 9 pillars was passed down from that era. In that dispute between the old and new suns, few knew what roles the other deities played. And once Ra successfully became Atum, no one cared about these matters. Like in the myths of ancient times, Shu and Tefnut were the first generation of deities created by Atum, but as Ra ascended to the throne of the sun, myths in the mortal realm easily changed accordingly. People believed the god of atmosphere Shu was born from Ra's breath, Tefnut from his cough, and from these two were born the sky and the earth. Everything seemed unchanged. Merely the name of the original creator had changed. But Ra still remembered. Each one of them should thank him for his mercy at that time. Osiris, so you were unwilling to descend. You want to stay here and pray that the outer god will spare your life? Without lifting his eyes, Ra saw through Osiris's little machinations with clarity. Though the event of Set murdering Osiris did not occur in this world, the event itself was unimportant. What mattered was its internal logic. Getting murdered by his brother while having the upper hand was testament to Osiris's very average abilities. With such little ability, he even wanted to learn from others to defect. Being deceived by Isis, Ra acknowledged her wisdom and tactics, worthy of someone he favored. But Osiris, without a sound, under the cover of his sleeve, a long scroll fell into Ra's hand. Thoth, still partly in the sea of origin, noticed the slight movement of the robe. At a mere thought, he guessed what it could be. Among the 9 pillar gods, only Osiris had once changed his primary godhood, from the god of agriculture to the god of underworld. This poor fellow dared to defy Ra even at this moment. It wasn't praying for him to spare my life, God Ra. I merely thought we might have a conversation. As far as I know, 1,000 years ago you suffered a serious injury, and it was through rebirth that you restored your wounds. Is that correct? Unaware of the commotion in the room, Osiris asked again. Yes, are you implying if my opponent was him? Correct, he was indeed involved. Still without raising his head, Ra calmly provided the answer. Chapter 692 Undead Book _2. If that's the case, then respected Ra, could the reason the deities from the alien realm are unwilling to communicate with us also be related to this? Compared to us, the existence of Isis proves that the outer god is not unable to communicate. Or is it that you don't actually wish for us to communicate? With an ever less courteous tone, Osiris did not believe that Ra could act against him on this sea of origin. And furthermore, whether the other could survive afterward was uncertain. The outer god might not necessarily eliminate them all, but Ra, who had long been their enemy, probably couldn't escape. As for the previous unconditional killing of those few deities, from the perspective of the Egyptian gods, without knowing about the existence of chaos, they had different understandings. Hemenu's creation myth differed greatly from other worlds. It was rumored that one symbol of the primordial water, the 8 primordial spirits, Nun, birthed the first deity, Adam. He descended from the flower, and from then on, the sun shone upon the boundless water surface. However, as the first god in the world, Adam was the strongest god, but also the weakest god, because at that time, all of Hemenu's godhood was piled upon him. Thus encumbered by the world's unique law, his power not only did not become incomparably strong but actually weakened. The godhood beyond the sun greatly reduced his power. Under instinctive guidance, Adam began his so-called creation journey. He split the wind and atmosphere, creating Shu. He split the lake and rain, creating Tefnut. He commanded the two to become husband and wife, then handed the godhood of the sky and the earth to their offspring, Geb and Nut, and also commanded them to become a couple and to bear more bearers of his godhood. With each reduction in godhood, Adam grew stronger until one moment he felt he already possessed the power to surpass all gods, and then he stopped such division. He believed that all things in heaven and earth were born because of him, and the deities were also created by him. They had neither reason to resist him nor the power to do so. Thus, even though some godhoods beyond the sun remained, Adam no longer separated them, and Hemenu's creation thus ended. And this provided an opportunity for Ra's later usurpation. Recalling, Osiris knew that when Ra became the new sun, he learned from Adam's lessons and stripped away the remaining godhoods. For instance, Batet and Sekhmet were deities born from the radiance of his eyes. The purity of godhood granted Ra the strength that no god dared to challenge, and since then, no one attempted to challenge his position, until the arrival of the outer realm. However, according to Osiris's understanding, although the deities from the outer realm killed 4 pillar gods, it should have been because they chose to be enemies with him. Even if they died, perhaps the outer god, to maintain pure strength, would recreate new deities by separating them again. Impossible, it should be impossible, there's no way, with Adam's example in front, that deities would simultaneously grasp so many relatively weak divine authorities, right? Absolutely impossible. How could anyone do such a counterintuitive thing? Ra, that's how it is. This may be Hemenu's war and your war, but it might not be a war for all deities. We should think about this in another way, instead of resorting everything to force. Glancing at the other deities, Osiris saw that Thoth seemed to look at him with support, and Geb appeared as if clinging to a lifeline with a face full of agreement. As expected, it was not just Osiris who thought this way. Everyone's thoughts were the same, except they didn't dare to voice them. In any case, I wish to stay here temporarily and wait for the situation to change. Of course, if Lord Ra wished to display supreme divine power and sweep away everything, that would naturally be best. The voice echoed above the sea of origin, and behind the gold mask, Ra's expression was hard to read. He still looked at the mortal realm, but Osiris felt that this might be a form of evasion. After all, for millions of years, no one dared to confront him like this. Osiris. After a moment of silence, Ra slightly raised his head. His gaze was calm and indifferent, perhaps a result of millennia of accumulated authority, but Osiris felt an involuntary sense of unease. I will give you one more chance to obey my command, and to do your best to destroy the sin people of the mortal realm. If you can accomplish this, I will forget your previous actions. No need, Your Majesty. I insist on my opinion. What you believe is not always necessarily right. Taking a deep breath, facing that gaze like dead water, Osiris spoke. Very well. With a slight nod, behind the gold mask, Ra's lips seemed to move. Then Osiris, since you wish to stay in the Sea of Origin, I will fulfill your wish. As long as you do not regret it. The fingers under the long sleeve moved slightly, and a scroll emitted a divine radiance. Chapter 693 Undead Book _3. In the mortal realm, similar creations were not uncommon in the tombs of the pharaohs throughout the ages. Mortals called it the Undead Book, which recorded praises to the gods, curses against threats, and the life and achievements of the pharaohs as evidence of their deeds in life. People believed that the god of the underworld, Osiris, used it to judge the good and evil of mortals in their lifetime, and then they would sail across to the next life. Everything was so orderly as if it were a legacy passed down from ancient times. However, one thing many people forgot was that Osiris seemed not to have been born a god of the underworld. He was originally the god of agriculture in the mortal realm, overseeing the growth and decay of all plants. Were it not for an accident, the underworld would never have concerned him. So the question arises, in the world of Hemenu, most of the important powers were born at the very beginning and then divided by Adam. It was naturally the sun god Ra, or rather, this was one of the authorities that Adam had not yet divided. Ra's solar barge possessed part of the divine authority. Each time the sun set, it sailed through the underground and the waters of the netherworld. Its emergence signified the sunrise. The sun continually intersected the realm of the living and the dead, symbolizing rebirth and renewal. However, when Ra ascended to godhood, to ensure the purity and strength of his power, he decided to abandon the power of the god of the underworld. As the god of wisdom and the god of script, Thoth was well aware of this because he assisted Ra in the process of relinquishing the god of the underworld's authority. Due to the connection between the sun and the world of the dead, although Ra decided to relinquish this authority, he ultimately did not choose to directly create a corresponding deity, for this would cause him to completely lose control over this power. Thus, he entrusted Thoth to assist, and together they created the divine artifact, Undead Book. By mastering the Undead Book, Ra could maintain influence over the afterlife without diminishing his strength. He also drew on this authority's power by reincarnating to absorb the authority of the 8 primordial spirits. Thus, legends and myths arose in the mortal realm, and the authority granted to Osiris actually originated from this as well. Even Thoth knew that while the magic separated from Isis after her death belonged to him, its life aspect was also refined together into the Undead Book by Ra. He attempted to create a divine artifact surpassing all things, like himself above all gods. Unfortunately, he ultimately did not succeed. However, this did not diminish the power of the Undead Book, nor did it affect its control over Osiris. Buzz. The scroll hummed, emitting a faint sound. Simultaneously, there was a resonance with Osiris' body, forming an invisible connection. Osiris' face abruptly changed. In this sea of origin, how could Ra possibly attack him? You are overthinking. I did not harm you. I am merely reclaiming what is mine, although that thing is your everything. The voice was calm, and the scroll flew from Ra's hand. Contrary to the original myth, the earlier Osiris became the god of the underworld after being murdered by Set. His aspect as the god of agriculture was never lost. But now, as a deity banished to the underworld by Ra, the authority of the god of agriculture had long been reclaimed. Ra attempted to fuse similar divine authority with life, and predictably he failed. But regardless, before him now, Osiris had no power to resist. Wait! Snap! There was no unnecessary confrontation, even more decisive than the actions by an outer god. The Osiris, who had just attempted to challenge Ra's position, turned into a painting on the Undead Book, his fear at the brink of death vividly depicted. No turning from darkness to light. Not even seeing Isis. Osiris fell there and then. An outer god might be terrifying, but as the sovereign of the gods of Egypt, could the sword in Ra's hand not be sharp? Now only 4 remain. With a casual pull, Ra extracted a portion of power from the Undead Book and tossed it to Nephthys, the guardian deity of the dead and the household. By my command, unleash the final calamity and let the dead cover the earth. All who have died, who die now, and who will die in the future shall come to life as weapons to execute my will. Let the earth crack open, and bones walk upon the ground. Plagues, suffering, and curses will fill the rivers and mountains. Not only the Hebrews and Egyptians, but all the dead shall be among them, Nephthys and Geb. Do you have any objections? Besides Thoth, no one knew how Ra killed a pillar god with a flick of his fingers. Geb only felt that the common sense he had previously built was constantly being shattered recently. Compared to Ra and the outer god, he was just a pawn crossing the river with no advance nor retreat. As you command, your majesty. The opponent's smile looked worse than crying, but Ra did not mind much. Whether they succeeded or failed, Ra could accept it. Regarding the means and power of the outer god, he had gained increasing clarity. Though strong, it was not insurmountable. If the world can push me to the pinnacle of this domain, then, with a calm demeanor, Ra glanced at Thoth. Just keep pretending to work. It doesn't make much difference with or without him. After all, Thoth had done quite a lot for him, and at least before he truly failed, Ra believed the other would not dare to really act against him. Chapter 694. 7 Difficulties. Mortal Realm. Heliopolis Solar Golden Temple. The turbulent Nile River, fertile black land. Her waters irrigate the black soil. Her milk nourishes Egypt. Praise the black land. Praise the Nile River. Long live, source of myriad waters. You come to this land. Arrive in peace, bringing life to Egypt. Hidden deity, you have guided night into day. We celebrate your guidance. Praise your authority. You planted the gardens tilled by the sun, giving life to all who walk. You ceaselessly water the land, along your descent from heaven. Keeper of food, giver of grain, you bring light to every family. Above Heliopolis, the clouds had scattered, and devout believers were singing hymns. In recent days, more and more believers had been gathering near the holy city. Some brought their families. Others came alone on pilgrimage. Hundreds of thousands converged here, their sacred songs in praise of the gods resounding day and night. Whether it was ballads recounting the deeds of the gods or texts from some volume of the undead book, carrying the chapters that glorify the Nile, the pious anthems reached the clouds, rendering the city all the more divine and extraordinary.
Top.
In a corner of the holy city, as the organizer of everything, Qasim appeared gentle and distant. His fingers gently tapped on the wall, as if to accompany the hymns. Believers from afar cast admiring glances, considering him the most perfect servant of God in the mortal realm, the priest who always remained in the home of the gods. Ibu, teacher, do you need anything? You have been busy settling these pilgrims who came from afar. So, Ibu, do you know why they are so devout? After a while, the sun dipped low in the west. Qasim seemed tired, his eyes closing gently. By his side, Ibu stepped forward to support his father and teacher. That is because God exists. Since he exists, faith naturally follows. This was Ibu's belief as well as that of the vast majority. Why wouldn't people believe in something that objectively exists? Is that so? Think again. Qasim continued to ask with a gentle smile. If one must believe because God exists, then there are many gods that exist in this world. Egypt has Egyptian gods, those Sin people have their gods. Tell me, why should we believe in the gods of Egypt and not theirs? That is because Sun will protect us, guiding us forward. Foreign gods will only protect their own believers, so our faith is given only to Sunday. Ibu offered his answer according to logic after a moment of silence, but it was so candid. People were willing to believe because the gods brought benefits, not because of their might and greatness. Ibu, many a qualified priest knows this. If they didn't at first, they would gradually understand it in the process of spreading faith, Qasim remarked. But this only answers why people believe in God. It does not address the current issue. Look! While the melodious songs continued to echo, Qasim, who was the nominal leader of the holy city at the moment, was discussing the origin of faith. In the past, God has brought favorable winds and rain to the Egyptians, warding off disasters more than once, but such a grand pilgrimage has never occurred before. Now, hundreds of thousands have gathered here, and even more are coming from all over Egypt. Tell me, why is this? Because they have encountered disasters. Taking a deep breath, Ibu seemed to understand what his father really wanted to teach him. I understand. For a God, the kindness bestowed upon believers should only be temporary. When people first encounter divine grace, they rejoice. When they receive it a second time, they thank the deity for the gift. But as they keep receiving it, they will take it for granted. Therefore, the gifts of a deity should never be quantified, nor become customary rules. If that happens, God would lose his mystery and the believers their awe. Let reality instill fear in them, and let God be the hope to avoid fear, yet that hope is ethereal and vague. Thus, the law's rewards and punishments must not be fully known, for then its might cannot be measured. Of course, all this presupposes that the deity truly possesses supreme might. The more he spoke, the more Ibu felt his own faith in God waver. This was a way to help gods develop their followers. But knowing this, he couldn't become a devout believer himself. Thinking this, Ibu felt both admiration for his father's experience and wisdom and a sense of irony. Thus it is with all things in this world, Ibu. The most capable officials of the dynasty are the ones who don't believe in the law, believed in by the common people. The most devoted servants of the gods are not devout believers themselves. The devout are the believers. Of course, there are exceptions, but they are too rare. Ibu, I wanted you to think about these things to understand the logic behind them. That way, you can become the most important servant to any deity. Qasim's voice was calm. He never hid his own age and weakness. He had told Ibu a long time ago that his life wouldn't last many more years. All right, now that the official business is done, it's your turn. Speak. What did you come to me wanting to say? Chapter 695 7 Difficulties _2. Today's teachings were entirely fortuitous, prompted by Ibu's sudden visit. Qasim was somewhat surprised. What had brought him here? Teacher. Father. Ibu changed midway, biting his teeth. I've seen those visions again. I saw the sky torn asunder, in the distant lands beyond my sight, the yellow sands being drawn out, flowing to the world's edge. The stars were trembling, storms dying and being born anew. The water vapor circulating between heaven and earth was split into four. Darkness spread across the world, black smoke rising beneath the sun. The pillars in the sky crumbled in succession. Their falling fragments would kill 2/3 of the creatures on earth. Is this really just a vision, Father? Feels so real, as if happening in the past, present, and future. I've been feeling uneasy these days. This is just a vision, Ibu. Qasim interrupted with a calm demeanor. Only La, the all-seeing deity, sees the truth. What you have seen is certainly not reality. Perhaps the recent bustle has left you not quite well. You can take some time to rest, contemplate what I've previously spoken to you about, and by the way, help the struggling believers around you. Both thought and action are indispensable. I understand, teacher. Suppressing the unease in his heart, Ibu bowed slightly and left with a bellyful of doubts. Behind him, Qasim silently watched him depart. After a long while, the high priest of Heliopolis returned to the temple of the sun god. He stood in a corner, not joining the prayers of the people, but quietly listening to the end of a hymn, then raised his hand to signal. High priest, do you have any instructions? I'm sorry to interrupt your devotion to God, but I still had to come here. Smiling, Qasim spoke facing the effigy, with his back to the congregation. I have a prophecy to announce. Whispers spread through the crowd, not expecting another divine edict. This morning's temple did indeed flicker with golden light. The city's believers thought it was just a change induced by the gaze of the deity. But here was another prophecy. As you thought, I received the command of La this morning. I've interpreted it at noon. Now I shall proclaim it this evening. Recalling the words Ibu had spoken, Qasim turned and looked at the people kneeling in the temple. God speaks. The people with sin blood still linger on the earth. Gods of the alien clan will bring curses down upon the children of Egypt. Frogs will emerge from the waters, covering houses, fields, and roads. Lice will spring from the earth, biting the people, livestock, and king. Beetles will come to ruin pastures. Plagues will infect the herds. All that are struck by it, none shall not die. All untouched by it, boils will also sprout on their bodies. Finally, gods of the alien clan will turn water into hail, falling from the sky to the earth. They will turn the sand into locusts, devouring our food supplies. Such is the wickedness of the evil gods. They will bring sevenfold disasters upon all the children nurtured by the Nile River. Murmurs rose again within the crowd, incredulously looking at Qasim and also towards the divinity behind him. Sevenfold disasters, each one enough to cause them suffering, let alone cumulatively. If these calamities indeed befell them, they knew not how many would survive to the end. High Priest, the prophecy bestowed by Allah, should tell us how to resolve this, right? Someone tentatively asked, and seeing the hopeful eyes of the people, Qasim smiled and nodded. The peoples of the earth have disappointed God, having failed to exterminate the sinful alien clan to this day. So Allah summoned the creatures of the underworld, allowing them to return to the mortal realm to execute His will. Profaning wraiths, it was a taboo within the teachings of the Egyptian God's church, but if a god himself was doing it, Qasim didn't know what to make of it. However, compared to these, he thought more about other things. The curse of alien deity. It was unclear whether this curse was specifically targeted at Egyptians or if they were simply collateral damage. Russell. In the world of Hemenu, the 8 primordial spirits are a certain manifestation of the world. Above the primordial water, all life begins. However, for everything in the world, there is an opposite. Where there is order, there is chaos. Compared to the stable and quiet Tartarus of chaos, the chaos of Hemenu disperse among the laws of the world, gathering in the world's shadows. Russell. In the underground river, within a space that exists and yet doesn't, a massive being lay sprawled out. On its mountain, specks of gold and silver interwoven flames were still burning, clashing and extinguishing against the wisps of black vapor. The power of the flames was so great that the black vapor often required several times its strength to extinguish just a part. Yet as time passed, the black vapor seemed to become stronger. It was as if it had received some sort of blessing. With each inhale and exhale, its strength grew purer. Crack, crack, crack. The figure writhed, its body clashing with invisible chains, the massive creature evidently feeling some discomfort. But its eyes remained closed, its consciousness still mired in slumber. The scourges of both the former god of sun had ultimately been thoroughly subdued in Ra's hands. According to Ra's prior estimates, it would take at least a few hundred years for it to break free. Apep, the chaos serpent of Hemenu, was said to be the source of chaos born alongside the sun itself. If the primordial sun god Adam represented the beginning of all, the source from where all life sprang into being, then Apep was the end, the demon that would destroy everything. Its sole purpose since birth was to destroy all order in the world, so much so that in the oldest of times, the then sun god Adam had to fight it every day. Mortals passed down tales that when darkness fell, it was the sun god driving the celestial sphere to the other side of the world, locked in a deadly struggle with the chaotic serpent. The rise of the sun meant the god had triumphed over the demon intent on destruction, once more ruling over the world. However, unlike other deities of Hemenu, Apep lacked rationality. As an embodiment of chaos, it too was undying. No matter how many times it was defeated, it would revive again with each new night. Which is why the Egyptian Ra, unlike the divine king of chaos, wasn't so autocratic. For an extended period, as the most critical task of their role as the sun god was to suppress this monster that sought the world's destruction. Of course, all this ended with the coming of Amun-Ra Adam. When Ra usurped the power of the 8 primordial spirits, he truly gained the might to suppress Apep. With just one strike, he dealt unimaginable damage to the chaotic serpent. For many mortal years, it lay unable to awaken and wreak havoc. Yet with the recent changes in the world of Hemenu, the chaos serpent seemed to be changing as well. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of breaking chains grew more frequent, especially as the mortal realm's climate and celestial events became chaotic due to the fall of the pillar gods. Its dissolution accelerated. As the antithesis of order, in these wavering times, Apep seemed to have consumed the perfect tonic. Even if the world's powers were not inclined towards it as with Ra, its strength grew day by day, instinctively shattering the shackles that bound it. Hiss, huff. With unconscious hissing and breathing, Apep's eyelids quivered slightly. It seemed close to awakening, yet it seemed to be missing something as well. For the first time since its birth, it had been struck into slumber, and to reawaken it required either the turmoil of the world or some other stimulus. As for what kind of stimulus could reach the world's origin, the place where Apep slumbered, before it actually happened, it was probably impossible for anyone to predict. Chapter 696 Falsehood and Truth. Crackle, crackle. The fire blazed, lighting up the surrounding buildings. Deep into the night, there were few signs of activity within the city walls. Although some time had passed, the impact of the natural disaster had not yet faded. The loss of life, particularly after counting the reduced numbers, was a horrifying sight to all. Tramp, tramp, dark clouds over the city. Climbing up to a tower on the city walls, Aaron gazed into the distance. The Egyptian camp had withdrawn quite a bit, as the previous disaster had claimed the lives of thousands, and now they had learned to be more cautious. The pharaoh even sent people to rebuke them, and if it were up to Aaron, they should have executed the envoys on the spot and then taken the opportunity to break through Memphis, looting it before leaving. However, obviously all these ideas rested on the powers possessed by Mes. If he disagreed, then Aaron was helpless. As expected, Mes once again rejected Aaron's request, and his reason remained just as naive. According to God's promise, those who have brought down calamities have already been punished. Without the incessant rain, I can completely help everyone rebuild this city in a very short time. Looting others is not what I want, nor what a benevolent person should do. Since the violent have paid the price, if we continue to retaliate against other Egyptians, what difference would there be between our misdeeds and theirs? I don't want my people to become slaves, but I also don't want them to enslave others. Therefore, I will not agree to your idea. Moreover, Aaron, with a hint of incomprehensibility in his eyes, Mes looked at his brother. Why did you order the sacrifice of those who have not yet understood the greatness of the divine? What you have done to them and to those who share your blood, how is it any different from what we decry the Egyptians for? Damn it! Such a pointless bottom line. He struck the stone brick on the city wall, remembering the direct conversation, and Aaron still felt somewhat helpless. With Mes' help, in just 3 days, countless stones had been transformed into sturdy walls. The harsh task set by Pharaoh seemed to be close to completion, but the arguments between Aaron and Mes over ideological differences continued to weigh on his mind. Is there a difference? Of course there is. Without those deaths, what would have held back the subsequent disasters? If so many had to die, then why not let those who only cause trouble die first? I made that decision for the overall benefit of all Hebrews, not for myself. With you by my side, I would never die no matter what. So why would I do such things just to save my life? Besides, can't you see? Everyone else supports my actions. What does it matter if they are not accepted by outsiders? You are the great prophet of the Hebrews, not of all humans. Taking a deep breath, he vented his emotions where no one else was around. Under the profound night sky, Aaron quickly composed himself again. Although the term idealism did not exist in this era, he could somewhat understand it. However, Aaron did not consider it a good thing unless one's desires could be manifested. Otherwise, ideals could not be separated from reality. Click. In the distant horizon, towards Memphis, faint lights could be seen. Aaron knew that had he been closer, he would likely have seen the lights shining brightly there. Ever since the persistent heavy rain had ceased, an indiscriminate epidemic had descended upon the mortal realm. I remember that they abhor filth and revere frogs and beetles, holding them as sacred. I wonder what those Egyptians are thinking in the face of such a situation. The Hebrew camp had similar occurrences, but they had the final fountain and mess scepter. By comparison, although he had no chance to understand the current situation in Memphis, Aaron could guess some of it. God's hand was upon the livestock in the fields of Egypt, bringing a severe plague upon the horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, and sheep, almost wiping them out. Yet the livestock of the Hebrews was spared. Not a single one died. This clearly shows that the life and death of cattle are in God's hands, and are not the lives of humans also under his grasp. Yet the Pharaoh remained unconscious of this, such is the folly and ignorance of the barbarous nations. He carefully penned these words on the papyrus, and by the light of the fire, one could see other contents above on the sheet. Others did not understand what he was doing or its significance, but Aaron knew clearly. He was recording history. Although the true history contained inaccuracies and contradictions with his records, this did not affect him from continuing to write as such. Click. Having finished writing, he looked up at the sky again. Hailstones fell occasionally, though not yet intensely. However, the traces of locusts could be seen, prompting him to pick up the pen again. As the Egyptians still refused to let God's people go, God commanded Mes to stretch out his scepter over Egypt. The divine envoy brought an east wind across the land, bringing locusts that landed in all the territories of Egypt, in an unprecedented and terrible infestation. The locusts covered the ground and darkened the land, consuming every vegetable and remaining fruit on the trees. This was just a preliminary record. It needed further additions, revisions, and resequencing. Aaron stored away the papyrus, secretly deciding that if one day they could leave Egypt and return to the birthplace of the Hebrews, he would compile the contents into a book. Chapter 697 Falsehood and Truth _2. He would record the various tribulations they experienced on their departure from Egypt and the might of God, admonishing future generations that this was the journey protected by the deity the Hebrews and their ancestors worshipped, and whoever made themselves enemies of the Hebrews would be met with disasters and destruction by God. As for the people who died in the process, let's just gloss over that for now. Only God's favor could unite later generations, for if God treated everyone equally, how would they develop a sense of national heritage? Only in this way, after their generation had passed, would their descendants be able to click. With his right hand on the sword's hilt, Aaron's eyes instantly sharpened. Despite being lost in thoughts of the future, this did not mean he had let his guard down. At first, Aaron had thought the noisy friction came from some animal that had sneaked in, but now he saw this was not the case. At the end of his gaze, the ground trembled ever so slightly. At one moment, as if it could no longer contain it, a stark white skeletal hand reached out. It seemed to express a yearning for the ground above, much like a drowning person incessantly clawing upwards, yet only grasping at air. Clang! Drawing his sword, the bone hand broke off with a snap as the blade came free. Aaron's expression shifted, for he remembered the origins of these bones. Those cavalrymen I killed, we collected the bones of our own, but we buried them here. What is this vengeance even after death? But if I could kill you while you lived, do you think I would fear your retribution after death? SSSHH. Taking a step forward, Aaron thrust his short sword into the ground and stirred. The world of Egypt also had legends of wraiths after death, so they were not too surprised by this. On the endless desert, there have long been stories of wandering skeletons, and now having seen it with their own eyes, there's nothing incomprehensible. Ah! A piercing scream echoed from afar, and Aaron swiftly turned around. The direction from which the sound came was the city center. First startled, Aaron then remembered what was there, the spring of life, alongside which lay the hastily buried corpses of the faithless. You've got to be kidding! To him, ragged skeletons like these were not a concern, neither individually nor by the thousands. But if they were to emerge at the city's center, or even if it was a resurrection of the undead, could the living truly bring themselves to kill them? Some could, others could not. But without a doubt, even with Mess' scepter, a catastrophe was looming. As if awakened by the initial cry, the city at night immediately bubbled into turmoil. Skeletons crawled out of the ground, some with flesh still clinging to them. Another disaster, and who knows whether the Egyptians are suffering the same. His gaze sweeping beyond the city, at the site of the Egyptian camp obliterated in a dark tide. There now seemed to be white figures meandering, though they appeared to move with purpose, heading straight for this city. Looking at the situation, Aaron held little hope. If there were any, he would note it down, that the vile Egyptian gods had desecrated the dignity of the dead. If not, of course, that would be simply mentioned in passing. Turning, Aaron ran back towards the city to stabilize the situation. Though he and Mess had ideological differences, they still trusted each other in this regard. Bang! Slap! Within the royal palace in the city of Memphis, Pharaoh Ramses II paced emotionlessly, the heavy air enveloping the palace, making his mood evident to everyone. Bam! Once again, his palm struck the table, and the pharaoh's aged yet piercing gaze swept over the ministers and guards within the palace. No one dared to speak, all understanding the reason for Ramses II's anger. Years had passed since the deities left, yet his monarchy had remained stable. However, since the divine decree and his decision to act against those condemned by the gods, the Sin people, one disaster followed another. Things were somewhat better before. Although there were deaths and Egyptian agriculture took a hit, it wasn't enough to cause a major crisis for the vast dynasty. However, as the heavy rains ceased, a terrible natural disaster descended upon the Egyptians. Boils, blisters, plagues, locusts, ice fell from the sky and wild beasts frenziedly burst into their homes. There were even whispers among the mortal realm, suggesting this was retribution against the Sin people, for their persecution had ultimately led to their own undoing. The deities of foreign lands overwhelmed the guardians of the Egyptians, and they would surely pay the price for it. Absurd! Resuming his place, Ramses II felt an immense frustration in his heart. He was not afraid of his enemies, nor did he think the Hebrews were particularly difficult to deal with. But outside the domain of man, in the realm of the gods, Egypt was soundly defeated. The one who had once come before him, that Hebrew prophet, had unhesitatingly displayed his transcendent power, even willing to help the sick and desperate Egyptians, as long as they would pray sincerely to the evil god. In contrast, the high priest of Egypt was still away in Heliopolis, merely organizing hymns daily without any other achievements. Ah, I forgot, there's also me. As the ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, a deity in the people's eyes, yet I can only sit here, watching my people perish one by one. Having not slept all night, the pharaoh, over 100 years old, grew tired. He leaned back in his chair, with no intention of dismissing the waiting ministers. They were utterly useless, capable only of complaining and carrying out tasks. If it were the past, Ramses II might have thought of them as his most capable subordinates. But now, he found them an eyesore. Divine power! How am I supposed to fulfill your tasks, to lead the Egyptians through this crisis? Once again, he prayed in silence, but without any hope for a response. He had tried many times before, even if the divine power of the sun still protected him. Yet he was unable to hear the voice of the gods. It seemed the gods had abandoned the Egyptians. Apart from the divine edicts to destroy the Sin people, there was nothing else. Drifting into sleep, consciousness blurring, the pharaoh felt as though he was sinking, descending in the water, falling and rising in a dream. At a certain moment, it was as though he arrived somewhere else. Ramses! Ramses! Who? Startled awake, the aged pharaoh was still majestic. He quickly surveyed his surroundings, then suddenly stood rooted to the spot. He was no longer in his royal palace. This was a space beyond description with words. An ocean of black and gold churned beneath him, with shards of broken light scattered across the sky. Gold-red radiance enveloped him. Ramses felt that, if not for this protection, he might have been annihilated at the mere sight of that ocean. Although this was awe-inspiring, it was not enough to shake the pharaoh who had weathered a century of vicissitudes. What truly brought him joy was the presence before him. At this moment, he was standing atop a great sun orb that seemed ablaze. In front of him, a deity with a golden face watched over him. He had the body of a man, the head of a hawk, and golden hair cascaded down his back. Atop his head, a gold-red sun disk shimmered, with brilliance swirling within. Divine power! Kneeling, the monarch of the mortal realm paid his respects to the monarch of the heavens. Disaster upon disaster. Your children are displaced and suffering from diseases and injuries. Please put an end to all this, mighty Ra. In my capacity as your chosen king of the mortal realm, I offer you everything I have. Everything? Ramses seemed to hear Ra pose this question. He was taken aback. Because everything of a mortal was meaningless to a god. Even the ability to counter mess was merely because the god had once bestowed divine power upon him. But since the god had asked, the pharaoh naturally would not deny it. He simply repeated his statement, expressing his devotion to the god. Very well, it shall be as you wish. I will personally put an end to these catastrophes. Nodding slightly, Ra's gaze swept over Nephthys, who had revived the wraiths. All previous attempts had failed, and he no longer believed the other could succeed. In the struggle between superior beings, others were merely auxiliaries. In the end, only he himself could change the outcome. Chapter 698 Division of Land. As moon descended and sun rose, the sky over Hemenu saw the sun burn fiercer than usual, illuminating the earth with bright and unblemished light. Awakening from rest, Ramses shook his heavy head. In the royal palace of the pharaoh, someone guarded day and night. No annoying buzz of mosquitoes and flies could be heard outside. Yet, as he awoke fully, he always felt as though he had forgotten something. It's really old age. I can't even remember dreams clearly, he muttered. La has still not responded to me. And Egyptians continue to struggle amidst deep waters and raging fires. His face was calm, but upon waking, he was once again faced with cruel reality. If it were just one or two cities, Ramses thought he could accept such losses. For the command of La, paying a price was something Egyptians should do. Everyone took it for granted. However, recent experiences prompted the pharaoh of the 19th dynasty to have some doubts. Even though the strength bestowed by La upon every pharaoh still resided in him, it seemed as though all the promises he had once made to the Egyptians had expired. Divine oracles had come from Heliopolis, but the divine incarnations foretold had never reached Memphis. Although the envoys sent by the pharaoh to the holy city adamantly claimed to have witnessed Thoth, god of wisdom and script, where had he gone? Shouldn't he have come to Memphis to explain the divine will to the pharaoh in detail? Speak. What have you come to me for? He asked. With a slight shake of his head, Ramses's gaze faintly swept over the ministers who could hardly hide their fatigue. They had already been waiting for a while, probably not daring to disturb his rest. One cannot manage a single task, and now suddenly, everyone seemed smarter than the other. Ramses awaited their response, which was probably going to be a display of their grievances, proving their incompetence with reality. However, as the minister recounted, the pharaoh's expression grew increasingly grave. What did you say? Are you sure about what you're saying? He pressed. Resurrection of the dead. Are you accusing the deity or challenging the faith of all Egyptians? He exclaimed. It is not so, your majesty. I too wish this wasn't true, but indeed, the bones of the deceased have crawled out of their tombs and have been reborn, heading towards the Hebrews' dwellings. Kneeling on the ground, the broad-shouldered Egyptian had a bitter face. Those who died of the plague did the same. They lost their life one moment, and the next they were reborn carrying the epidemic. The deceased's families thought this was a divine miracle, that La had granted new life to the dead. But the result. He didn't finish his sentence, but everyone knew what the outcome was like for the living who got too close to the dead. Death was the only outcome. Even the newly dead could become new wraiths. Anger rose again in his heart, and Ramses enunciated each word. Resurrection. Excellent, excellent. Now tell me, in the time you have been waiting for me to wake up, what have you done? He demanded. Your Majesty, The answer, of course, was that they had done nothing. They had been waiting for the pharaoh's command. However, before the voice could die down, suddenly, a thunderous tremor came from afar, shaking the entire royal palace. Boom! Crash, clatter. The palace quaked, ornaments and vessels crashed to the ground, and guards quickly closed in towards the pharaoh's direction, trying to ward off this unforeseen disaster. Step aside, he bellowed. Without heeding the explanations of the incompetents any longer, Ramses II pushed past the guards and strode out of the palace. In that moment, the pharaoh silently swore to himself. Once this abrupt event was over, he would definitely replace them all, rather than let them continue to display their ineptitude. Thunder rolled again. Without any warning, another explosion sounded, as if the whole world were shaking. Ramses stumbled, struggling to maintain his balance, and then strode out of the royal palace. Daylight was brilliant, and the sky seemed unchanged. Standing at the gates of the palace, the pharaoh gazed towards the direction from where the tremors emanated. The buildings within the city of Memphis stretched before him, theoretically obstructing his view. But for some reason, as the third tremor came, it felt as though someone was speaking to him, communicating the source of the disaster. The ground cracked open, and dark red liquid seeped out in strands. The crowd that couldn't dodge in time fell into it, without even a chance to scream. The city of Memphis seemed to be tearing apart, and countless Egyptians faced death. The voice in his ear, halfway between reality and illusion, made Ramses feel as though he had truly understood the pattern behind the fissure's opening. They are pursuing those who have been resurrected. Such taboo violates the rules of the mortal realm. Is their existence what has enraged the gods? He mused. His chest heaved. In Ramses's memory, the corpses of the dead were protected by goddess Nephthys, and their spirits belonged to the afterlife. Any violation of the order of life and death would be incinerated mercilessly by the sun's light. Yet now the sun seemed to turn a blind eye to them. Instead, these winding fissures appeared to be pursuing the trail of the dead. And the source of these fissures, Ramses knew all too well. Summon Marenta to lead men to the holy city. I am old now. According to the traditional rules of the 19th dynasty, he's the next pharaoh if unexpected events arise. He instructed. As for you, prepare the chariot. No, set out at once. You are to accompany me, not one less, he ordered. Holding the millennium scepter belonging to the pharaoh, Ramses issued his commands calmly. At this moment, he had finally made up his mind. Chapter 699 Division of Land _2. This, your majesty, you want to? Of course. Let them leave this place. Leave the land of the Egyptians. Pharaoh Ramses addressed the speaking minister indifferently. The pharaoh's gaze silenced him immediately. Even now, no one dared to question Ramses's authority. I should have done this sooner. Only a deity can oppose the power of another deity, not us. Egypt does not welcome their stay. Feeling as though his spirit had much lightened, Ramses felt the fatigue from his recent awakening had completely dissipated. His spirits were livelier than ever, as if someone were chanting softly in his ear. Yes, he would go himself, to find that prophet who had once impudently stepped into his royal palace, determined to lead the Sin people away. The troubles these people had brought were more than enough. If he could resolve these issues, then Pharaoh was willing to see them courteously out of the country. As for contravening the prophecies, if the god Law were to appear before him right now, then Ramses would be willing to admit his wrongdoings on the spot and prove his loyalty with his life. The returned spirit of Law could surely solve all problems, but if the god Law still refrained from any direct intervention, to prevent Egypt from perishing by my own hands, as Pharaoh, I have no other choice. Looking up at the sun, the source of all light and hope within Ramses's heart, he actually hoped for the dissent of the other party. After all, he was old and would not live much longer. But if the Egyptians lost their deity, that would be the greatest catastrophe they had ever faced. Boom! Crack! On both sides of the Nile River, through the desert and the oasis, countless fissures snaked across the earth. The deep rumbling of the earth was like the heartbeat and roar of titans, with red liquid flowing from the cracks, like their blood and sweat moving on the surface of their skin. From a mortal's perspective, there were deviations, even if they sensed an inexplicable enhancement. Ramses's judgment was still somewhat mistaken. He thought the source of the earthquake was within the soon-to-be-completed Sun City, crafted by the increasingly powerful prophet, but in fact, the rifts in Memphis were not wrought by Mes. On the contrary, in the city at that moment, Mes, holding his scepter, touched it to the ground. He was exerting himself against the shaking of the earth to lessen the potential damage. Crack! 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 Woo! Outside the city, the gaping fissures in the earth were like the chariots of the mythological age, bringing the wraiths of all lands to where the deities sought to bring ruin. The recent turmoil within the city had just been quelled, and what followed was an endless ocean of wraiths. How can we possibly withstand this? Some cried out, others despaired. As if on a floating world scroll, all of life's myriad forms were contained therein. Leaning on his sword, Aaron appeared exceptionally calm amidst the panic of those around him. Among the returning monarchs, he saw many in resplendent garments and exquisite decorations. Others in coarse sackcloth. The disparities of their former social statuses were evident. Now though, whether pharaoh or aristocrat, commoner or slave, when they died, when their god had decided, they all appeared here together. Indeed, in the face of death, all beings are equal. No, it's still unequal. With the existence of the gods, with an afterlife, even in death, there are levels. Casting a glance at the crowd displaying all walks of life, Aaron was not afraid, for he probably knew that he didn't need to defeat all his opponents. He just needed to survive as long as possible. In the end, the envoys of the god would naturally exhibit another divine miracle, sweeping all the enemies from the land. The earth gushed forth red water, as if with the blood of the alien gods. It flowed into the Nile River, like fresh blood coursing through it. This is the 8th punishment God has brought down upon Egypt. It ought to be recorded and passed down from generation to generation. Perhaps it was because of the continuous death of the deities. Some things that were usually hard to see had become a little clearer. Aaron vaguely felt that he could actually see titans bleeding in the sky. The whole world seemed to mourn for his pain, yet was powerless to help. From top to bottom, inside and out, it was like a piece of porcelain that had been shattered and then pieced back together. At this moment, Hemenu's earth was so fragile, yet so resilient. Spirit Realm, 5th layer. At the center of the world, there was unprecedented tranquility and calm. Like the sea surface before a storm, under the bottomless abyss hid endless undercurrents. Black and white colors corresponded with each other above and below, while 4-colored rings of light kept spinning. The east was cyan, the west was dark blue, the south was fiery red, the north was ochre. It wasn't that they appeared in their corresponding directions, but in the chaotic 5th layer of the spirit realm, it was they who anchored the directions of east, south, west, and north, just as the positive and negative energy interface anchored up and down. It was like a spinning diamond, yet there was some interplay between them. Everything looked so surprisingly orderly, but if one were to delve deeper in, it was clear that the light in the north was dimmer by more than just a shade. Unexpected, yet logical. As long as the cycle was in place, theoretically, earth, water, wind, fire would strengthen and weaken one another, ultimately reaching a stable concept. By then, a sudden surge in strength from one element would not pose any issues, as it would slowly return to balance under the influence of the cycle. However, that was all after the cycle had come to fruition. But for now, earth, water, wind, fire, there seemed to be some deficiencies in some areas. Set, the god of war, deserts, and storms, the underground metal was his bones. He was the most powerful existence among the all-gods. As one of Egypt's 9 pillar gods, and even briefly reigning over the mortal realm in some later records, he undoubtedly possessed great strength. But the earth, within his divine authority of desert, paled in comparison to the other three elements. Therefore, the current cycle between earth, water, wind, and fire was imposed by external forces. They had not initiated their first spontaneous revolution. The core of the fifth layer of the spirit realm was thus not stable enough, failing to complete its final transformation. This was only temporary, for the nourishment sent from the outside world was far from over. Whoosh! Like the sound of flowing water, the noise once again echoed in the deathly stillness of the void, resembling surging tides flowing down a river. At a certain moment, a crimson mist, as if made of blood, abruptly appeared at the center of the fifth layer of the spirit realm. Circling in the void for a moment, it then rushed towards the ochre light spot as swiftly as a whale returning to the sea. In an instant, the other three twinkling light spots shrank, their respective powers beginning their final compression and settlement. The space-time barrier enveloping the core of the spirit realm vanished without a trace, and in the entire fifth layer of the spirit realm, countless gazes also turned in that direction. Is that the core? Can we enter it now? My divine kingdom is shaking. Fortunately, there are layers attached to help stabilize my realm. If it were just up to me, I probably would have fallen apart long ago. This oppressive feeling, I don't know what changes have occurred there. Once it stabilizes, perhaps I should go and see. There's new movement again. I must hurry to send down the divine decree and spread the news from here. I hope it doesn't affect me. I've only just raised my kingdom. How could I encounter such an event? Curiosity, evasion, delight. For a moment, the vast and boundless fifth layer of the spirit realm tensed up because of that sudden change. No one knew whether this change was good or bad. Some saw it as an opportunity, others as trouble, but regardless, it would not change based on the attitude of the observer. They simply kept accumulating power quietly, receiving the forces that came from the void. Until with the entrance of the final streak of light, as if gathering to the extreme, the center of the spirit realm's core erupted in a resounding explosion. Chapter 700 Egyptian Edition, Supreme Treasure of Creation. Whoosh! A glimmer of light suddenly emerged from where the red mist poured out. As time and space overlapped, the inside and outside lost their meaning. As with the previous few times, through some kind of temporal change difficult for ordinary people to comprehend, the external force just appeared at the center of the fifth layer of the spirit realm. The ethereal fog continuously emitted, and enveloped in the deepest place, the shimmering streamer moved at a seemingly slow but actually rapid pace. Following a pre-established route, it charged straight towards the yellow-brown speck of light. Invisibly, the existence of the two seemed naturally unified, so harmonious and integrated. The speck of light flickered like breathing, yearning for the arrival of the Earth's source power. However, at this moment, a wave of consciousness suddenly spread outward from within that completely controlled streamer. Where is this? Where's Godla? Is this the place where they were captured before? Nut, are you there? Shu? Set? Are you still there? Where are you? The consciousness spread outward, and compared to the previous few, the consciousness of this fifth otherworldly visitor in the fifth layer of the spirit realm was clearly more lucid, and it seemed that he had not been affected by other forces which had altered his soul. This gave him more energy to observe his surroundings at this moment, but not because his strength was greater than the previous few. This was simply because Geb had been devoured earlier, resulting in more leftover protective strength. Of course, this also confirmed another issue, which was that with the fall of one deity after another, Hemenu's strength had grown increasingly weaker. Resisting the erosion from chaos had made it increasingly difficult for him to make a move. Even the chessboard composed of the world power became damaged. The original rules gradually ceased to be absolute, resulting in 3 moves made earlier each time, seeming to convey some message to La sitting across the table. Of course, these had nothing to do with Geb at this moment. The intertwining black and gold streamers circled his consciousness, struggling against the rolling pressure coming from all directions. It seemed impregnable, but Geb had no intention of placing his hope on it. He was only struggling to grope around, trying to find the Egyptian gods who had arrived before him. However, he could obviously not find anything, as what was left here were only their corpses. Crack. Who? A soft noise instantly tensed Geb's spirit. He frantically surveyed the surroundings, praying that someone heard his voice. However, soon he despaired when he found the location of the sound. It was beneath his feet, where the black and gold streamers were disintegrating inch by inch, seemingly indicating that the disaster he had desperately created at Hemenu was ultimately ineffective. Now, since the enemy had not perished, it was his turn.
No.
Why? If Isis could, I can too. Outer gods, spare me, I can. Ah! Crack. With another splintering noise, once the streamer broke, Geb's consciousness was completely exposed within the void of the fifth layer of the spirit realm. The chaotic spacetime tore at his soul for a moment, then stopped the next instant. A supreme will watched from an infinite height, fixing this piece of chaotic spacetime. Come. Vaguely, as the yellow-brown speck of light came nearer, the mutual attraction became more distinct, and Geb seemed to hear this voice. Then the next moment, his consciousness plunged completely into darkness. To separate, mingle, recombine, live, the Ka and Ba, belonging to the Egyptian deities, slowly transitioned to another state during this process. Boom! The light contracted, and the surroundings returned to nothingness. Then, in an instant, the light point burst explosively. The three elemental planes that had already begun to take shape could not escape this step, seeming as though with Geb and Earth's arrival, certain things were completely amended. Like the explosion at the beginning of creation imagined by mortals, after endless contraction, there was endless expansion. The core of the fifth layer of the spirit realm seemed to instantly gain for suns, proclaiming its existence to the surroundings. At the same time, this fluctuation even began to transmit from top to bottom, spreading out through the layers of the spirit realm. The fourth layer of the spirit realm. As the nearest place, the well of reincarnation bore the brunt, and under the mysterious pull, the cycling force quickly completed the exchange between the two. The rotation between black and white became more agile, and faintly, the part belonging to life and death seemed to have some kind of limit opened. If it was said that the cyclical force of reincarnation could previously have been hindered by a more powerful force of life and death, that issue no longer existed now. At the same moment, as the changes in reincarnation occurred, transformations also began to happen in the exploding, expanding elemental planes. Before, the fall of 5 successive Egyptian gods brought the origins of earth, wind, water to the spirit realm, and as deities who once wielded authority, their Ka and Ba also fell into the corresponding layers along the power of the spirit realm, shattering and dispersing among the elements. However, as former gods, even if the essence of the Egyptian gods was not strong, their integration with earth, water, wind, and fire was not false. And at this moment, as the well of reincarnation connected, the previously suppressed changes also began to occur at a 1,000-fold pace. The scattered, shattered souls instantly fell into the well, then followed invisible lines to return once again. Chapter 701 Egyptian version of Supreme Heavenly Treasure _2. Swish! A glimmer of light suddenly appeared where the red mist surged. Time and space overlapped, and the distinction between inside and outside lost meaning. As with the previous few times, through some sort of time-space transformation incomprehensible to mortals, the power of the outer world appeared at the center of the fifth layer of the spirit realm. The illusory mist continuously emanated, and within its deepest confines, the shimmering radiance moved at a speed that seemed slow yet was actually fast. Following a path already decreed, it surged straight towards a yellowish-brown speck of light. In the depths of the cosmos, the presence of the two entities seemed as if they were naturally one and the same, so harmoniously and seamlessly integrated. The speck of light flickered like a breath, yearning for the arrival of the Earth's source power. However, at this moment, within the utterly controlled stream of light, a wave of consciousness violently expanded outward. Where is this? Where is La? Is this the place where they were captured before? Nut, are you there? Shu? Set? Are you still here? Where are you? The consciousness spread outwards, and compared to the few others before, the consciousness of the fifth layer of the spirit realm's fifth visitor from the otherworld was clearly more lucid, and it seemed he hadn't been influenced by any other power that could have altered his soul. This meant that at this moment, he had more energy to observe his surroundings, but this wasn't because his power was greater than that of the previous few. It was merely because the time of Geb's consumption had been brought forward again, leaving more of the protective power remaining. Of course, this also confirmed another problem. With the fall of one deity after another, Hemenu's strength was increasingly weakening. The resistance against Chaos's erosion had made it difficult for it to free up hands, so much so that even the chessboard formed by the power of the world had become damaged. The original rules were no longer absolute, with interventions occurring earlier with each instance, seemingly conveying some message to La sitting across the table. Of course, all of these were irrelevant to Geb at the moment. The dusky gold radiance hovered above his consciousness, desperately resisting the immense pressure from all directions. It seemed impregnable, but Geb didn't place his hopes on it at all. He was merely groping around arduously, trying to find the Egyptian deities who had arrived here before him. However, it was clear he couldn't make any discoveries. After all, the only things left here were their corpses. Crack! Who? A faint sound immediately tensed Geb's spirit. He frantically scanned all around, praying in his heart that someone had heard his voice, but soon he despaired upon discovering the source of the sound. It was right beneath his feet where the dusky gold light was disintegrating inch by inch, signifying that the calamity he had previously caused at great expense to Hemenu had ultimately been unsuccessful. Now, since the enemy had not perished, it was his turn. No. Why? If Isis could, I can too. Deities from beyond. Spare me, I can. Ah! Crack! Followed by another shattering sound. As the radiance broke apart, Geb's consciousness was completely exposed in the void of the fifth layer of the spirit realm. The chaos of time and space tore at his soul for a moment, then stilled in the next instant. An ultimate will observed from a boundlessly high place, immobilizing that patch of chaotic time and space. Come. In the distance, as the yellowish-brown speck of light drew closer, the feeling of mutual attraction became clearer, and Geb seemed to hear this voice. Then, in the next moment, his consciousness plunged into total darkness. Separation, fusion, reconstitution, living, the Ka and Ba, belonging to the Egyptian deities slowly shifted towards another state throughout this process. Hum! Boom! The light contracted, and the surroundings returned to nothingness. Then, in the span of a moment, the speck of light exploded with a bang. The three elemental planes that had already begun to take shape were not spared from this step, as if with the arrival of Geb and the earth, something had been fully replenished. Like the explosion at the beginning of creation imagined by mortals, after an endless contraction came boundless expansion. The core of the fifth layer of the spirit realm burst out like four suns in an instant, proclaiming its existence in all directions. At the same time, this fluctuation even started to spread from top to bottom, passing along layer by layer through the spirit realm. The fourth layer of the spirit realm. As the nearest place, the well of reincarnation bore the brunt of it, with the power of cycles quickly completing an exchange between the two under the guidance of a profound force. The rotation between black and white became more agile, and subtly, the aspects belonging to life and death within seemed like some upper limit was being lifted. If the power of the cyclical force of samsara could have possibly been hindered by an even stronger force of life and death, now this problem no longer existed. At the same moment when changes in the cycles occurred, variations also started to happen within the elemental planes that had erupted and expanded. Previously, the fall of the first 5 Egyptian deities brought to the spirit realm the origins of earth, wind, water, and as deities that once wielded authority, their Ka and Ba also fell into the corresponding planes under the power of the spirit realm, scattering amongst the elements. Regardless, as former deities, even though the essence of the Egyptian gods wasn't very powerful, their harmony with earth, wind, water, and fire was genuine. And now, as the well of reincarnation connected with them, the suppressed alterations also began to occur at a much accelerated rate. The scattered and shattered souls instantly entered the well, then returned along invisible lines. Chapter 702 Egyptian version of Supreme Heavenly Treasure _3. In this brief process, the soul from the alien realm was thoroughly cleansed of its past traces, remolded according to the rules of the spirit realm. From one to myriad, the souls of each deity were disassembled into countless soul seeds, the parts that once belonged to the gods now merely tainted with faint traces. They returned to their origin, absorbing the elemental power to construct themselves, reborn alongside the four expanding and bursting elemental planes. Whoosh! Like rain, meteors fell, and in the newborn inner realm earth elemental plane, the first elemental life awoke from its confusion. Instinctively, it looked around at the other elemental beings born right after itself. Intuition told it that these were its kin. But another instinct told it that by absorbing their strength, it might become even more powerful. Where is this? Who am I? A subconscious inquiry, followed by a fragmented image flashing through its mind. It was a mountain, which, in the eyes of the newborn earth element lord, seemed to be its former self. So it is. I am the heart of the mountains. A loud shout, although not understanding what mountain meant, it seemed to have found the purpose of its existence. The next moment, voices rose from all over the still expanding earth elemental plane, as numerous elemental lives proclaimed their arrival to the world, a scene that was also unfolding within the other three major elemental planes. Lives inherent to the elemental plane were thus born, and at the same time, in the core of the quintuple spirit realm, these elemental planes seemed to also complete their final step. Shu and the sky goddess bestowed upon them a kinship with wind, Rain and lake goddess Tefnut bestowed upon them a kinship with water, Set and Geb bestowed upon them a kinship with earth, and as the most original domain of spirituality, they were naturally close to fire. It was but a beginning, like the fourth layer of spirit realm, which continuously harvested external energies through the cycle of souls, becoming a part of the spirit realm's inner cycle, and so were these elemental lives. A part of the unique soul structure of the Egyptian gods was preserved. For elemental life, the name, image, heart, Ba, and Ka were equally significant. Their core of energy and consciousness became the elemental core, their heart, maintaining life and serving as a bridge between will and element. Their Ka, intertwined with the elemental plane, the part that once bore the deity's authority, now used to bear the might to dominate over elements. The more powerful the elemental life, the more elemental power its Ka could command. And just as Hemenus might never belong to the deity itself, the inalienable rights of primordial life always stemmed from within the elemental plane. As for their name, image, and Ba, in the future, the names of elemental beings would become the keys to summoning them, the image would become the foundation of their projections in the outer world, and their will descending into the alien realm would be similar to the original Ba structure. Through the sacrifices and invocations of outer world lives, the elemental planes will also continuously absorb the essence of the outside, accumulating droplets over endless years, becoming one of the sources of their own growth. The elemental planes were reopened, and the lives belonging to them were successively born. The Otherworld Divine Clan thus became a part of the spirit realm, their origin turned into materials to construct the planes, their souls into the source of life within the plane. Every bit of power from the Egyptian pillar god was extracted cleanly. Such was logic in the eyes of the divine. Everything was for their own perfection and strength, the same for any being or thing. Meanwhile, as the last transformation completed, the metamorphosis of the fifth layer of the spirit realm was also set to begin. A grand icon seemed to be gestating, and the overall strength of the spirit realm subtly climbed to a new level. Not enough. At the distant end of the void, the will of the god hovered over the primordial waters. The four major elemental planes were initially formed, balancing each other with positive and negative poles. The cycle had formed, and as time passed, the equilibrium would gradually be reached among earth, water, wind, and fire, with no one element surpassing the others. A new power surged under God's will, but for God at this moment, it was far from enough. Primordial waters. The core of the fifth layer of the spirit realm. When did the construction of the positive and negative energy interfaces begin? Of course, it began after the departure of Io was discovered. The fifth layer of the spirit realm had many options, but the reason it ultimately formed an inner and outer structure was singular. Only with the formed cyclical elemental plane could it attempt to digest the might of the primordial waters. Outside of Sun City, the earth had yet to settle. Wraiths swarmed like a tide, but Ramses and his entourage had already reached the outskirts of the city. These long-departed lives, not distinguishing between friend and foe, would indiscriminately destroy all life, and not even the pharaoh was an exception. However, Ramses II did not need to worry about this, because he had long devised a solution. The Benben stone, placed on Egypt's largest, oldest, and holiest pyramid, a structure resembling the pyramid's apex. It was obtained by Pharaoh, kept by his side. Thus, all obstacles ceased to be problems, and they arrived at the city's outskirts smoothly. But, could I really have taken it off? A flicker of doubt crossed his mind, then cast aside. The pharaoh being able to take down the Benben stone seemed to pose no problem. Chapter 703. Seeing the Sun. Enter. It seems these wraiths still can't handle them, so you all should also put away those thoughts of yours. If there were a chance, do you think I would have wished to take this step? Outside Sun City, Ramses II gave his final instructions. Behind him, like a miniature pyramid, the Benben stone floated in the center of the crowd. It caught the light from above, scattered warm sunlight, and also dispelled the followers' distracting thoughts. Indeed, in the hearts of these Egyptian dignitaries, there was not a unanimous approval of Pharaoh's decision. After all, the Egyptians had enslaved the Hebrews for 1,000 years already, and now suddenly they were told, although the divine decree demanded their complete eradication, Pharaoh advocated sparing those sin people, which left even those who were generally loyal to Ramses with some doubts in their minds. But all speculation ceased before the Benben stone, which, according to legend, was an object transformed from a meteorite that fell from the sky at the inception of the Egyptian dynasty and stood atop the oldest pyramids, uncontrollable even by successive pharaohs. They could only construct a similar artifact atop their own pyramids, known as a capstone, and crafted in the form of a sundial. The four sides represented the four directions. The pointed top was symbolic of the gnomon. It was placed on the pinnacle of the pyramid, a representation of the land that first emerged from the primordial water. The circular perimeter symbolized time, and the central cross symbolized space, essentially representing the order of temporal. Eventually, they engraved upon it their most fervent inscription: "Build him a stairway for ascension, that he may ascend from the mortal realm to the heavens." This was perceived by the Egyptians as the gateway to the sky, the staircase of ascension, never before controlled by anyone. Only Ramses had done it. Thus, in these long moments when no divine intervention had manifested, no one dared question his thoughts any longer. Let's go. I have banished him 3 times. Now it's my turn to meet him. Sun City. God will watch over all this. With large strides forward, the sea of the undead parted before Ramses. No matter what was on their minds, at this moment everyone followed by Pharaoh's side. Since the Benben stone had chosen Ramses, there must be a reason behind it. Even the most devout believers would not question his authority at this time. Click, clack, the sounds of bone friction and flesh collision arose intermittently, and aside from a few individuals, it left the people accompanying him quite terrified. The stench of rotting flesh and decay spread. Without the light from the Benben stone, many in the group would have likely died of shock or contracted diseases directly. Fortunately, reality holds no room for ifs, and on their way further in, the sounds of clashing weapons and rallying cries rose and fell. At the city's center, the temple, shaped like a pyramid itself, loomed in the distance. Centered around that location, thousands of meters in all directions were packed with people. Some holding children, some leaning on canes, but most were young. After all, in these unrelenting disasters, only the strong, young individuals had a better chance of survival. However, in that crowd, the most eye-catching was still the elder standing in the very center. with the tip of his serpent staff lightly touching the ground. A profound divine light circled around him. The wraiths that the guards held back were just the ones that slipped through the net. Countless undead encompassed this small city. Below the earth, the skeletons of wild beasts crawled through the soil. Above in the sky, bone birds let out mournful cries. But they were all kept at bay by that layer of divine light, and even in Pharaoh's eyes, what he could see at this moment was even more. A phantom scroll unfolded in the sky, its emanating power continually directing the arrival of the wraiths. And the true enemy that the elder holding the scepter faced was indeed it. Without the existence of the scroll, perhaps the city's undead would have been easily swept away by him. This was the power of a god, and also the reason Ramses had come here. Initially, Misi's power was not so formidable, which is why he thought there was still a chance to oppose him. But now, unless the all-gods of Egypt directly descended here, he could not think of any other possibility of confrontation. Moreover, it's meaningless now. Throughout the world, from ancient times to present, only the Nile River basin has been able to support the survival of a civilization. Those deserts with their oases can only sustain tribes and cannot give birth to civilizations comparable to that of Egypt. Enter. It seems these wraiths still can't handle them, so you all should also put away those thoughts of yours. If there were a chance, do you think I would have wished to take this step? Outside Sun City, Ramses II gave his final instructions. Behind him, like a miniature pyramid, the Benben stone floated in the center of the crowd. It caught the light from above, scattered warm sunlight, and also dispelled the followers' distracting thoughts. Indeed, in the hearts of these Egyptian dignitaries, there was not unanimous approval of Pharaoh's decision. After all, the Egyptians had enslaved the Hebrews for 1,000 years already, and now suddenly they were told, although the divine decree demanded their complete eradication, Pharaoh advocated sparing those sin people, which left even those who were generally loyal to Ramses with some doubts in their minds. But all speculation ceased before the Benben stone, which, according to legend, was an object transformed from a meteorite that fell from the sky at the inception of the Egyptian dynasty and stood atop the oldest pyramids, uncontrollable even by successive pharaohs. Chapter 704. Seeing the Sun _2. They could only construct a similar creation atop their own pyramid, transforming it into a capstone, built in the form of a sundial. The square shape represented the 4 directions, and its pointed tip symbolized the gnomon. It was placed at the pinnacle of the pyramid, symbolizing the land that first emerged from the primordial water. The circular perimeter represented time, and the central cross symbolized space, essentially embodying the order of temporal. At last, they engraved the inscription they most desired. Construct for him the ladder of ascension, so he may ascend from the mortal realm to the sky. This was the gate to the sky in the eyes of the Egyptians, the stairway of ascension, which no one had ever managed to control except Ramses had done so. Thus, during this moment when God had long ceased to manifest, no one dared question his intentions. Let's go, I've expelled him 3 times. Now it's my turn to meet him. Sun City, God will watch over all of this. With large strides, the ocean of wraiths parted before Ramses. No matter what was on their minds at that moment, everyone followed by the pharaoh's side. Since the Benben stone had chosen Ramses, there must naturally be a reason for it. Even the most devout believers would not question his authority at this time. Crack, crack, the sound of bones grinding and flesh colliding occasionally resounded, and except for a few, those who accompanied him could scarcely avoid being terrified. The stench of rotting flesh and blood spread, and without the light of the Benben stone, many among the group would likely have died of fright or contracted a disease directly. Fortunately, reality holds no ifs. Along the way, the sound of weapons clashing and battle cries rose and fell. At the city's center, a temple reminiscent of a pyramid loomed in the distance. Centered around that spot, thousands of kilometers were packed with people. Some held children, some leaned on canes, but most were young people. After all, amidst these continuous natural disasters, it was only the strong and able-bodied who had a greater chance of survival. However, in that crowd, what truly caught the eye was the old man standing at the very center. He lightly touched the ground with the tip of his serpent staff, and divine light flowed around him. The wraiths held back by the guards were merely the ones that had slipped through the net. Countless wraiths enveloped this small city. Below the ground, the skeletons of beasts crawled through the soil. In the sky, skeletal birds let out mournful cries. But they were all blocked beneath that layer of divine light, and even in the eyes of the pharaoh, he could see even more at that moment. An ethereal scroll unfolded in the sky, its power continuously directing the arrival of the wraiths. And the true enemy that the old man holding the scepter faced was it itself. Without the existence of the scroll, perhaps the entire city's wraiths would have been easily swept away by him. This was the power of God and also the reason Ramses had come. Initially, Mes's power wasn't this formidable, which is why he thought there was still a chance to oppose him. But now, unless the all-gods of Egypt descended here directly, he couldn't see any possibility of opposition. And besides, it's pointless now. Throughout the world, from ancient times to the present, only the Nile River basin has been able to sustain a civilization. Those oases in the desert can only allow tribes to exist, not give birth to a civilization that could rival that of Egypt. If they can't find a better place, then I don't need to do anything. They will perish on their own. And if they can still find a place to dwell outside of here, that proves that their gods are still bestowing divine miracles. And God has no objection to this. Witnessing this miracle-like scene, Ramses once again reaffirmed his thoughts. He strode forward, heading in the direction where Mes was located. The living among the wraiths were so conspicuous, he hardly needed to do anything. When the group truly approached the circle guarded by the Hebrews, they were quickly spotted. "Who goes there? Halt!" A stern shout, the guard responsible for overseeing the area immediately called out to halt. But the next moment, his expression turned to one of disbelief. "Are you the pharaoh?" "I am Ramses, now step aside." The pharaoh glanced indifferently at the guard in tattered armor, instantly recognizing it as the attire of an Egyptian soldier. However, he didn't say much at that moment because standing here, he already felt the central surge of the crowd, the gaze from Mes watching him. "In accordance with the agreement, you have built Sun City. Now, it is time for me and your prophet to meet." For some reason, Ramses felt a bit excited at the moment. His body also felt better than usual. Given his age, this was somewhat surprising. Perhaps this was the power of the Benben stone. Continuing forward, the pharaoh did not think anyone in front of him would dare to obstruct him, and indeed that was the case. He hoped to end all of this quickly, to restore Egypt to its former peace. In the center of Sun City, in front of the new temple for La, the tension that had lasted all night gradually relaxed. Apart from the initial upheavals, the turmoil within the city soon calmed down. The tremors of the earth started severely, but then settled down. And although the number of wraiths was substantial, Mes did not consider them a threat. The ethereal scroll in the sky was about to dissipate. In the face of divine power granted by God, the departed wraiths couldn't actually breach his protection. As long as he depleted the last of the scroll's power, victory would ultimately be on his side. Chapter 705. Seeing the sun_3. Disaster upon disaster struck, but they did not succumb. At this moment, Mes even felt a hint of joy, for aside from confronting the projection of the divine artifact, he had spotted, from afar, the pharaoh whom he had encountered more than once. There was no army, no killing intent. The other party clearly did not come with ill intentions. Indeed, his perseverance was right. Aaron's judgment was too subjective after all. His Majesty Ramses II, the ruler of all Egypt, had no intention of breaking the covenant. He truly wished to keep his past promise of allowing the Hebrews to depart once Sun City was built. This was the last darkness before dawn. His goal in coming to Memphis was finally within reach. "Your Majesty, welcome to your presence. But please forgive my impertinence. As you can see, I still have to face this unexpected disaster," Mes said while holding the scepter, sustaining the force that protected the city. A short while later, in front of the temple, Mes held the scepter, maintaining the strength that guarded the city. When Pharaoh and his entourage arrived, the onlooking crowds had packed the place solid. Mes even spotted the hastily arriving Aaron, who was watchfully eyeing the newcomers. However, Mes felt there was absolutely no need for such worry. "No matter, Mes, you have proved your abilities to me," Pharaoh stated. "You and your people have built Sun City, offering this sacrifice to the god of Sunday. Your original sin may be inexorable, but as per our agreement, I still came here," he said in a tone that still carried a hint of arrogance, but no one present took it to heart. Centuries of tradition told them that the pharaoh should speak in this manner. Even when the goddess of life was still present, nor were magicians lacking who wielded various powers in the mortal realm, but they still respected the pharaoh, no one daring to slight him for it. This was an ingrained way of thinking, and it still existed to this day. Hearing Ramses's words, Mes finally showed a trace of joy. "Then, Your Majesty, are you meaning to say that, according to our covenant, you will not obstruct our departure from Egypt?" asked Mes. "Indeed, as I have said, you will be expelled from Egypt," Ramses replied tersely. "This place shall become forbidden to the Hebrews, and once you leave, you are not permitted to return," Ramses declared with composure. "In the name of the pharaoh, I have honored my agreement, and from this day forward, the ties between Egyptians and Hebrews are hereby severed." Whoosh! As his words concluded, a commotion erupted among the crowd. The veneration accumulated over thousands of years by the Egyptian pharaohs still loomed large, and even now, many Hebrews still dreaded this legendary god among men. Yet, now that Ramses personally promised their departure, did it signify that they had finally gained true liberation, no longer doomed to servitude? "Your Majesty, your morality is as noble as the sun," someone loudly praised, delighted that the other party was willing to honor the covenant. The joy in Mes' heart could not be concealed, and before him, Pharaoh extended his hand while a minister handed a piece of parchment to him. Mes stepped forward and unfolded the parchment to reveal the densely packed words on it. "Since you have no objections, then sign this document. In the name of the ruler of all Egypt, I will release and expel you, forbidding your return forever," Pharaoh stated. Clang! Drawing his sword, he used it to cut his finger and was the first to leave an imprint on it. Mes, upon seeing this, did not hesitate either, leaving his own seal on the document. At that moment, cheers arose from all directions, and Pharaoh's originally stern face seemed to soften considerably. "So, Mes, I have fulfilled my covenant with the Hebrews, haven't I?" "Yes, Your Majesty. Your commitment to your word is truly exalted." Still leaning on his staff, Mes smiled as he spoke. "Then, according to the covenant, the Hebrews should also leave Egypt, right?" "Yes, Your Majesty. My people and I will no longer disturb the peace of you and your dynasty." "Very well." With a smile and a nod, the pharaoh set the covenant aside. "Now, it is time for me to fulfill my duties as the pharaoh." Duties? Puzzled, in Mes' memory, the pharaoh was the ruler of Egypt. He ruled over the mortal realm, judged right from wrong, and was the executor of the law. However, the Hebrews had been building cities here. They had no opportunity to break the law. They had always been slaves, and now being released and expelled, there was no longer a relationship of ruler and ruled. So what then are the duties the other party speaks of? Whish! A sharp sword pierced through the chest, spraying droplets of blood. The cheering in the arena stopped abruptly, and everyone failed to comprehend what had just occurred. In midair, the light from the Benben stone illuminated the serpent staff, the once powerful sacred artifact now deadly still. Only Ramses, he seemed unaffected, his smile still gentle. "You see, this is it, Mes. As pharaoh, my duty is to maintain the laws of Egypt, to punish sinful mortals. And according to Egyptian law, the murderer shall die. Do you remember why you left Egypt over 40 years ago? In the city, the divine light encircling the Hebrews' living area began to fade away, and those spirits that were annihilated in an instant pressed forward tirelessly. But this time, there were no obstructions in front of them. In the sky, the sun's brilliance grew more intense, as if corroborating the pharaoh's words, ready to cleanse the mortal realm of all sins. Life was slipping away. At this moment, in Mes's eyes, the visage of the man in front of him started to blur. He felt that he was not facing a man but a sun, the very one worshipped in the temple of the sun god behind him, with a golden mask, the eagle-headed deity. I have always been curious as to what is special about you, Mes. It seems the world power from the other world wants to protect you. The outer god watches over you, and you are the only one upon whom he bestowed strength. He places the Hebrews on the gambling table on the one hand, and on the other turns a blind eye to you. So what exactly does he want? I do not know. With a tranquil voice, Ramses looked up at the sky, which was vast and empty except for the sun. However, I think, I'll know very soon. Thump. Drawing his sword back, Ramses was curious about what would happen to Mes, who now lay on the ground. And most importantly, what he was going to do next. Chapter 706. Stealing the Name. Ha! Finally! Letting out a long breath, Anrin sat upright on the great sun orb. At this moment, although only two lonely subordinates remained by LA's side, the expression beneath his mask had softened considerably. Previously, as the game progressed, although La was not completely certain of the final outcome, the power continuously pouring in from the world was his confidence. However, the lack of critical progress in the mortal realm had ultimately concerned him, for from start to finish, the pace of the outer god and the alien realm remained unchanged. As the pillar gods fell one by one, the world power surging from the alien realm never ceased. In such a situation, a lack of change was the worst change of all. Fortunately, that was before, and now, finally, something different had happened. LA's gaze lifted slightly since he discovered that the mortal was able to wield power in the mortal realm that increasingly approached that of a deity. He never counted on using a natural disaster to end the match. While the all-gods were in the sky, that mortal was on Earth, one layer separated them. Even if he summoned disasters that could destroy the Hebrews, Mes would definitely survive alone. So he ultimately chose to personally kill that mortal, who both the alien realm and outer god were particularly concerned about. In this way, it didn't matter whether he was special or not, as the mortal realm would no longer have this largest variable. In the end, if the situation ultimately required him to take action to save it, what awaited him next? His belief flickered, but before he could make a guess, the vast and endless sea of origin suddenly shuddered in LA's perception. The intertwining black-gold surface of the sea abruptly sank, and the water, clearly demarcated, seemed to lose its vitality on the black side. What was once active and erosive quieted down. Across from it, sensing the change in its adversary, the golden water, which had been barely resisting, also became calm. In the void, a sharp sense of rejection came forth, and the chessboard before La rapidly dimmed as well. All these rapid changes occurred in an instant. As everything entered LA's perception and the changes announced their end, the impact they brought was far more than a simple shift. Is this, the world power of the alien realm, starting to recede? Above the sea of origin, looking down at the still churning waves below his feet, LA's surprise was hardly containable. There was a clear change in the collision of powers between worlds, but to say they were receding wasn't quite accurate. To be precise, they were no longer as rampant and reckless as before. The clash between the two realms had become more moderate, and even though, up to this day, with the continuous fall of the pillar gods and the emerging gaps, Hemenu was still in serious trouble. This was still enough to astonish La. The water of the Sea of Origin is not water, and it originally had no color. The former Nine Pillars' spirit were very clear that the so-called black and gold were actually only an illusion of perception. Being a deity of Hemenu, the power of the alien realm appeared as black, and gold was the color representing allies. The colors truly represented stance, and the current change between black and gold couldn't be clearer in reflecting the power shift between the two worlds. Because of a mortal, the alien realm's law was actually retreating. Could it really be like this? As the power of the other world wanes, even the restrictive force of this chessboard has decreased as well. The Sea of Origin's restrictions on all gods have also relaxed, so I can do even more. He took a step, and for the first time since arriving, La stepped down from the great sun orb. Tremendous divine power overflowed from his body, and the sun rose from behind his head. Above the void, the power from the outer god descended from an infinite height, and La knew that the other party had also made a decision at this moment. It did not change and still decided to strike against God, rather than protect those mortals. Ha ha ha. Good. Come. I am waiting for you in the mortal realm.
La laughed loud.
The last time he felt such boiling excitement was during his battle with Adam. Although he wasn't as powerful back then as he later became, he knew it was do or die, so he wasn't afraid of death. And now, once again, he wasn't afraid of dying. Without a glance at the remaining two pillar gods, the great sun orb struck down, opening the barrier between the Sea of Origin and the mortal realm. The illusory sun and the real sun of the mortal realm unified into one, and immediately following, an indescribable power struck La. He paid a price for forcibly breaching the covenant and even leaving the Sea of Origin, yet with the departure of the alien realm's world power, Hemenu regained some advantages on its home ground, and the damage that should have nearly caused LA's fall didn't seem so terrible anymore. Although the Origin was still injured, La did not care at all. Looking up at the void, he was well aware that solely with the divine authority of the sun, he probably wouldn't stand a chance against the outer god, even if he had not been injured, and now, having been hurt again, he was almost certain to be defeated. But what of it if death can bring about final victory? I'm waiting to receive the power of the world, to become the savior of his choosing. What about you? What are you waiting for? A twinge of guilt flashed through his heart, then was erased. La knew he could have brought Nephthys and Thoth with him. Although the event occurred in just an instant, he still had the strength to do so, yet in the end he did not. Because he understood that only the complete destruction of the nine pillar gods would bring as powerful a force as possible to his celestial self. Though this alien realm god would definitely not compare to the greatness of the 8 primordial spirits, missing by an inch as the saying goes is missing by a mile, La would never give up any possibility that might slightly increase his chances of victory. Moreover, every bit of power gained now might become his support later on. I did not even spare myself. It's time you accepted this too. With the world on the brink of destruction, this is a necessary sacrifice. Above the primordial water, Amun-Ra stood silent, but the power swelling behind the layered space championed his cause. The power of the 8 primordial spirits fundamentally comes from the world. They have a disadvantage against the alien realm. Could they really also fall short against a god from the alien realm? In the comparison of world power, you had the upper hand, but in the comparison of divine power, it's my turn now. In the limitless void, the world of Hemenu, wrapped by 4 layers of barriers, continued to shine brightly, but his life had already entered a countdown. Crack. In the mortal realm, a peal of thunder exploded, yet the sky was cloudless. Outside the city of Heliopolis, Isis's perfect smile twitched slightly. This wasn't the first time she had sensed such a fluctuation. It had been the 9th time, except this one was particularly intense. The Son of God from an alien realm, the prophet endowed with strength by the outer god, had met his 10th death in Hemenu.
10 rebirths, 10 deaths.
Would he live again, or had the outer god's purpose been fulfilled? Isis did not know, but she had witnessed with her own eyes, after Mes accepted the divine revelation, that the gods of Egypt were forced to withdraw from the mortal realm. The onslaught from the alien realm surged in an instant, nearly a Pyrrhic victory, almost destroying the enemy at the expense of 3 times their number. Would such an assault continue if Mes were dead? Isis didn't know, but she knew that the opportunity she had been waiting for had also arrived. Isis, what are you thinking about? Thoth's brow furrowed as he seemed to notice Isis's wandering mind. But when the frown was placed on his ibis-like head, it seemed somewhat comical. Nothing much. What about you? Have you made up your mind? What's the rush? Such matters. Let me think about it further. Once more brushing it off, for Thoth, It would have been wonderful if the god La could secure the final victory. He knew the content of the ritual, but it lacked the assistance of life divine power. Yet if La were to achieve victory, on the one hand, he could take ample time to reanalyze and understand this ritual with the power of wisdom and magic. On the other hand, he could try to ask God La for life force. Compared to Isis, he trusted himself a little more. However, at this moment all of Thoth's previous plans were overturned. At this unexpected juncture, the Sea of Origin in Hemenu suddenly trembled. Before Thoth had time to react, God La forcibly burst through the gateway between the Sea of Origin and the mortal realm, leaving a place as if a graveyard of the gods. In an instant, Thoth, previously occupied with inconspicuous actions, was openly exposed in front of the outer god. The threat of death struck his face, and he didn't even have time to react. However, Isis, I've made up my mind. If there are no problems, let's start now. The tone shifted, and the usual calm and wisdom were thrown aside. At that moment, Thoth only hoped that Isis had not noticed his current predicament to avoid any delays at this critical juncture. And perhaps prayers had an effect, as Isis seemed unbothered by the change in Thoth's attitude. All right, since you have finally made up your mind, let's start now. You perform the ritual yourself, you probably wouldn't trust me, right? I'll just be in charge of providing the life force, which is key to gaining a whole soul. The smile was still there, her white fingers lightly tapped. In front of Isis, the verdant life divine power surfaced around her. Across her, seeing her agreement, Thoth did not dare delay. At this moment, he truly owed thanks to the space-time flow speed changes caused by the world's turmoil. The flow of the entire world had slowed down, and above the Sea of Origin was even slower than in the mortal realm. Without the time discrepancy, he probably couldn't have waited to complete the ritual. His right hand lifted slightly, the divine artifact book opened, and the previously recorded ritual emerged from it. Lastly, Thoth, with the authority of wisdom, verified the ritual, harmless, no loopholes, no possibility of being controlled or backstabbed halfway through the process. The only purpose of the entire ritual is to use his incarnation Bai as the foundation, complete the remaining parts of the soul, and sever the connection with other parts. At that point, he would be a new life, an entity completely unrelated to the past Thoth, just like Isis, even fate would be stripped away. Sigh, let's start. Taking a long breath, Thoth's palm pressed against the book. Complex runes and ritual tracks fell from it, one by one, line by line, instantly covering the space around him. At the same time, a protective barrier was also opened, with the divine artifact as its core. It was clear whom he was guarding against. Finally, as the main body of the ritual was about to be constructed, Thoth's ibis head turned towards Isis, or rather, her life divine power. Inject it now, I can't guarantee you won't stop halfway through. And once the ritual is complete, you don't need to worry about me turning against you. After all, at that point, we will be in the same boat. All right? She seemed to hesitate for a moment but was persuaded. Isis finally released her loosely clenched hand. In the surrounding space, the encircling life divine power, now unrestrained, surged toward Thoth's position. And as life divine power was injected, the ritual seemed to complete the final link, immediately shining brightly, flickering with a mystical force. There's nothing wrong with the ritual. Isis might have some schemes, but they surely don't involve me. Still somewhat uncertain, Thoth replayed the previous events in his head, but he couldn't find any issues. In normal times, he would never be so reckless, but he had no choice, he was running out of time. Come, begin. With a low shout, the ritual began to operate. Thoth's figure, too, was submerged within the ritual tracks. Chapter 707 New Saint. The speed is indeed fast. On the now empty Sea of Origin, as the pillar of Thoth gradually dissolved, his form also began to crack like shattered porcelain. From small pieces to large chunks, like scattering cherry blossoms, the fragments that fell were submerged in the ocean, not raising a single ripple. Quietly waiting for his own death and rebirth, from then on, he would no longer exist in the world as an Egyptian god. Perhaps for a brief time, he would become a mortal with extraordinary power and lifespan, or maybe soon, he could find an opportunity in an alien realm to become a new god. For a moment, Thoth's mood was a mix of relaxation and heaviness, for not everyone enjoys the feeling of starting all over again. Yet, just when he was enjoying this final moment of peace, a voice suddenly came from beside him. "Thoth, you are going to die too." The voice was soft, but Thoth immediately recognized its owner. It was Nephthys, the guardian deity of the deceased, the protector of homes, and the last of the 9 pillars spirit. "I am going to die?" Turning around, he hadn't noticed before. It wasn't until she spoke that Thoth unexpectedly remembered her. Nephthys seemed to have remained silent ever since she arrived on the Sea of Origin, never uttering a word. She carried out any task that fell upon her but never voiced her opinion. Until just now, it seemed as though she had spoken for the first time. "Ha, Nephthys, never mind me. You and your husband are truly different." Set charged fearlessly against the outer gods, while you chose to silently await the arrival of death. With a smile on his face, Thoth didn't mind chatting with a former colleague for the last time. Sorry, Nephthys, I almost forgot. You and Set never actually became husband and wife. That's another mess brought by Isis. So is this because of your godhood? As the protector of the deceased, have you come to regard life and decay with equanimity? No, the fear between life and death, I am far from having seen through it, and neither has the god law. Even though the world itself does not wish to perish, how could I possibly do so? Shaking her head gently, Nephthys repeated, "Thoth, you are going to die too." "No, I won't die. The apparent death is not actually absolute, just like Isis. Everyone thought she was dead." Smiling as he explained, Thoth's body fragmented even more rapidly. He felt the fate and divine power of 9-pillar god Thoth receding from him, but this was the very proof of his rebirth. Speaking of which, if I remember correctly, you and Isis were sisters. Had it not been for the invasion of the alien realm, you would have married Set after she married Osiris, becoming his wife. Unfortunately, due to the catastrophe from beyond our domain, all that came to an end. As the mind of the god Ra, I once heard him mention a corner of the future. You and Isis were meant to have a son each, renowned in the mortal realm. One celebrated in the world of the living, the other immortalized in the realm of the dead. But in the face of the world's power, fate seems so pale and powerless. Your current mindset, however, seems quite good. A mortal dies as a mortal should, and gods should have their own manner of death. Dying in such a disgraceful manner as Shu did at the end of his life is not fitting for a god. Just like me, if death is inevitable, I would face it undauntedly. His body had dissipated, only his head still speaking. Thoth looked up at the sky, wanting to see the legendary outer gods in his final moments. But unfortunately, he saw nothing. Anyway, I will remember you, Nephthys, for in these last moments of my life, you were the one who accompanied me through this journey. All that is Egypt will be deeply etched in my memory, to be forever cherished. From now till the end of the ages. Patter. With a final faint echo, Thoth's form completely shattered into pieces. Fragments scattered like rain across the sky, leaving behind only the divine authority he once possessed. This power, once carried by his Ka, seemed a bit at a loss, for its master, in theory, had not died, yet their connection was weakening. A hint of black and gold light swirled around it. As an early player among the divine pillars, this power from the world would not dissipate before Thoth utterly failed. But now, on Hemenu's boundless sea of origin, only Nephthys was left alone. "I already told you, Thoth. You are going to die too." Shaking her head slightly, she lay back on the last divine pillar in the Sea of Origin. Thoth saw nothing before, but Nephthys' view was somewhat different. From an infinite height, she could vaguely see a standoff between two gods. Immense and boundless powers fell from the void towards another god Law, with his influence and size in the entire world rising every second. Opposing him was the invading outer god. Death. Everything must meet its end. Chanting softly, Goddess Nephthys remained serene. I wonder on which day I will die.
Boom.
One moment calm, the next the world turned upside down. From the infinite heights, the power of the outer god fell from the sky, piercing through the space recently gathered by the 9 pillars as if puncturing a thin sheet of paper. In an instant, Nephthys was reduced to ashes before it. And the power of the gods did not halt due to her death. It continued downward, towards the mortal realm. Chapter 708 New Saint_2. There, above Sun City, the real sun shone resplendently.
Top.
Click tap. Hum. Outside Heliopolis, at the location of Thoth's ritual. Not much time had passed, but the ritual track was largely complete. With a crisp sound, the most crucial and irreversible step was fully accomplished. Above the high heavens, the divine pillar belonging to Thoth had dissolved, symbolizing the complete destruction of his Ka that bore his authority. Theoretically, lacking half his soul, he was also supposed to perish. However, the life force at the ritual sustained Thoth's vitality, and thus his fate was caught between life and death. The gods of Hemenu could indeed die, so their fates were not indestructible either. When its master approached destruction, it too would undergo transformation. At this moment, the once-named Isis chose for Io to replace her in bearing fate, and then to die in her stead. The fate of the goddess of life from Hemenu thus turned from life to death, and she emerged as half-transparent. However, Thoth evidently lacked such a convenient counterpart. He simply adopted a simpler, albeit not at all covert method. He directed his fate towards the authority he left over the Sea of Origin, deepening the connection that was already there. This behavior fooled no one. It was utterly incapable of hiding his survival from La God as Isis had done, but as the bearer of the wisdom authority, Thoth felt no one would care about his welfare at such a time. The authority remained there, the fate stayed there. Let the outer gods take them all. La God himself descended to the lower realm, and regardless of the outcome, Hemenu was bound to suffer greatly. In such a situation, who else would care about his life or death? Of course I care. Apart from oneself, no one cares more about the life of all things than I do. Her eyes curved, her voice sweet and gentle. Just like her past as a goddess of life, she had shown love to all things, and all things must indeed respond with love to her. Spreading her arms, Isis gazed up at the sky. There, an indescribable pressure was descending, and anything that stood in its way would be eroded. Only above the Sea of Origin was there still a swirling of black and gold. As long as the tasks Thoth had in the mortal realm were not failed, then this power that had initially encircled him would not be withdrawn. Theoretically, if the outer god took away this power, Thoth would have completed the ritual, and he would then have failed. Failing meant that the protective power would also disappear. The old would be crushed, and a new Thoth would be completely reborn. Considering the experiences of the previous pillar gods, this shouldn't take long. But this time, I'm here. Indeed, Isis hadn't sabotaged the ritual entrusted to Thoth, nor had she intended to disrupt his completion of this step. What she wanted was always what the other party did not. Since the soul reshaped by her ritual now possessed both Ka and Ba attributes, why could not the current Isis become a deity again? Just borrowing it for a while? I've earned quite a few merits, so he probably wouldn't mind, right? Come. A light shout, and in the sky, the authority of magic and Thoth's original fate slightly moved. At this moment, what sustained Thoth's life was Isis's life force, and as a former goddess of magic, wouldn't she have stored corresponding divine power? Not using it didn't mean she didn't have it. She had always given everyone the illusion of her use of the life force, keeping only what she called the remnants of being a goddess of life. But how could that possibly be true? A profoundly different divine power emanated from her body, directly making Isis another bearer of Thoth's fate through the connection between the divine position and fate. If he were still alive, this similarity would be meaningless, but the current Thoth was half alive, half dead. Whoosh! After hesitating for an instant, divine light descended from the sky, and the authority of magic and Thoth's fate directly collided into Isis's body. However, the black and gold glow still persisted, making the connection between the two somewhat awkward. The next moment, pulled by fate, Thoth's original wisdom deity position followed closely. When it also fell into that slender and frail figure, an aura almost touching the zenith of a true god immediately spread out. Not far off, Thoth, still engaged in the ritual, suddenly felt a significant alarm in his heart. He seemed to detect the change outside but couldn't fully discern its essence. Just as I thought. Compared to life, wisdom, and magic fit better together. Her eyes sparkled, and Isis's lips curled up. She smoothly gathered the power around her body, then looked at Thoth, who was still in the middle of the ritual. The barrier hosted by the divine artifact continued to function, and all the power brought by Thoth's divine descending sustained its operation. Theoretically, the Isis who had lost her divine position couldn't possibly break it, and even slightly lesser deities wouldn't be able to affect this barrier for a while. Thoth trusted its power, just as he trusted the rituals tested by the wisdom deity position to have no tricks. The fact proves that what you believed was indeed not wrong. The ritual had no issues. The previous me couldn't interfere with it either. Her finger slid forward, and the indestructible barrier was effortlessly torn apart before Isis. With the wisdom authority she now possessed on her body, it was basically like using a key. Unlocking it had no obstacles whatsoever. Chapter 709 New Saint_3. Step. Taking a step forward, Thoth's divine artifact struggled for a moment, but ultimately fell into the hands of Isis. And not until this moment did Thoth finally realize what had happened. Isis, what do you intend to do? You had just freed yourself from Hemenu's godly fate, and now you want to take it on again? You have taken away my divine authority. Do you really think the outer gods will leave you be? Don't be naive. They have come for the authority of all gods, aiming at the power to divide the world. Even if you had done something for them before, they will not. Crack. The voice stopped abruptly. Under the half-dead, half-alive spiritual body of Thoth, he clearly saw a crack forming on his book of divine artifacts. The gods of Hemenu do not possess such powerful life, and their divine artifacts are no different. As the divine artifact dissolved, a ray of spiritual light was extracted by Isis and then hovered in her palm. You see, we both harbor no good intentions. You abandoned wisdom and magic, but you brought your divine artifact down. Without me, you had already figured out a way to survive. You probably discovered some way to become a spirit of divine artifact with intelligence, didn't you? After all, text can carry information and wisdom, and with your authority you could certainly accomplish this. What you never expected was that I would offer a better way. If one could live as a god, who would want to become the spirit of an artifact? Thus you decided to cooperate with me, but in reality, you were neither planning to side with La nor wishing to join the outer gods. Once you possess a complete soul, you can shatter this artifact and reclaim the godliness of books and text. Then, no matter what choices you make afterward, you will be able to act freely. An artifact has an owner, but it indeed cannot be considered a part of the owner. If it were the indigestible world of chaos, perhaps, but in Hemenu, there was no such notion. So this was Thoth's ultimate reliance from the beginning. He always had a way out. But at this moment, his reliance was crumbling in Isis's hands, reverting to its original form. Possessing the godhood of life, I never avoided death, and being the sun god, La might not forever shine. Clever people always die because of their own minds. Thoth, godhood of wisdom and wisdom are different. Stepping forward slowly, Isis was, of course, not really prepared to take on Thoth's fate. Fortunately, he had not yet completely finished the ritual. So the last step she had to take was to personally kill him, strip the divine authority from its protection of black gold intertwined, and let Thoth's fate die completely, then return it to its original owner. Wait, Isis, we can still talk. I still have arrangements in the mortal realm. I secretly slew several guardians of the city-states but did not seize authority. Instead, I let it persist. Also, there's more. Below the earth, the world-ending serpent, Apep. I had once collected some of its strength while fighting alongside the sun god aboard the solar barge. seeking to understand if all gods could accommodate the divine authority of chaos, and I have some clues. Isis, what good does killing me do you? Do you think the outer gods are saints? Look, those Hebrews' blood flowed like rivers. Did they even glance their way? They did not. Spare me. I can do many things for you. Gripping the throat of the spirit body. Although the spirit body does not use it to speak, Thoth's voice truly stopped. Just like the first time she saw Io, on the banks of the Nile River, barefoot Isis stepped on the sandy soil, where every footstep bloomed fresh flowers and gentle breezes wafted through. Thoth, you simply think too much. But from now on, you don't need to worry anymore.
No.
Isis, I curse. Crack, the spiritual body shattered with the wind, gradually dissolving into nothingness. The goddess separated the godhood of wisdom and magic from her body again, and then waited a while, but everything around her remained as usual and nothing happened. Ah, then I'll just use it a bit longer. With a slight smile, Isis looked at the place where Thoth had lost his life. The resentful and fearful look in his eyes was still vivid in her mind, much like Shu had been at the beginning. TSK, how ugly. Mortal realm, Sun City. Ramses brandished his sword, looking around him, surrounded by countless slaughter and wails. There were wraiths and Hebrews against each other, and also his own Egyptians against those Sin people. His sword had nearly incited a riot in the city. But just now, a myriad of wraiths had shattered with the wind, and Ramses felt it. They're all dead, Thoth. You also couldn't escape disaster. The power of Amun-Ra surged, a testament clearer than any. Now it was his turn. The sun sets more than once, but no matter how many times, it will always rise again. With the Benben stone in hand, he believed he still had a fighting chance. At least he could probe Amun-Ra's final hand. Chapter 7:10. Sunrise and Sunset. Mess! Calling out the name again, Aaron still couldn't believe what he had seen. A meeting, a joyful encounter reflected in the other's eyes. The cost was life itself. Just a simple sword strike, and the prophet who once could summon the wind and rain was dead. Aaron had foreseen the pharaoh's betrayal, but he had never expected such a result. Swish! The sword sliced through the air, stabbing an Egyptian guard through a gap in his armor. Only the ministers who followed the pharaoh remained before Aaron. However, these powerful figures were just as panicked. Clearly, they too had not anticipated the pharaoh would do such a thing amidst the encirclement of the Hebrews. Even if in their eyes, these Sin people merely scavenging for arms were insignificant, this did not include letting them personally face danger and charge into battle. The son of great wealth does not sit in a hall that collapses. The son of lesser wealth does not ride an unstable horse, and a wise ruler does not seek fortune by courting danger. Although such sayings do not exist in this world, their logic does. What should we do now, tell me, what should we do now? They have so many people. This is their turf. How could you kill their leader here? How are we supposed to escape now? The voice was a bit strained. Life and death battles unfolding before their eyes. In terror, even the pharaoh's dignity was forgotten. But Ramses paid no attention. These ignorant mortals weren't worth his words. He just took a step forward, approaching the scepter standing on the ground. Without its master's handling, this previously mighty divine artifact now seemed as mundane as anything else. Reaching out, Ramses tried to grasp it in his hand. However, the next moment, as if he had touched red-hot metal, he quickly released his hold. This sensation, it's somewhat peculiar. Forget it, now is not the time. Once other matters are dealt with, you won't have anywhere to run. Frowning slightly, as if he had noticed something amiss, Ramses ultimately refrained from forcibly picking up the scepter. The changes now were favorable, the onslaught from the alien realm briefly pausing. He truly did not need to provoke him now, regardless of whether the outcome would be good or bad. Heh, I'll leave him to you then. Glancing at Aaron in the distance, Ramses surveyed the ministers present.
Panique, anger, blame, truly inferior.
With a thought, the light of the Benben stone no longer fixed on the quiet scepter, it began to emit a more intense buzzing sound. Moments ago, the minister who had spoken out in rebuke suddenly awoke. It was no longer the past. The pharaoh now possessed divinely bestowed power. He wanted to say something, but Ramses still ignored him. Although most of these people were of little use, they could still be utilized for something. Just let them fight it out, whether dead or alive, it didn't matter. A bright flash of light passed, and instantly, half the people in the place were gone. Only those who had shown disrespect in the crisis of life and death remained. Those who left were but a days away from the exteriors of Sun City, where the Egyptian army camp was located. Following that, a command drifted through the air. Deploy troops. I have mercifully forgiven these sinners, allowing them to leave, only to judge a worthy deceased. But they dared to resist, that is a capital offense. Dispatch all soldiers, dispatch all Egyptians capable of bearing arms. Kill these law-breaking sinners. Not a single Hebrew shall remain. Giving still useful people a task, Ramses pointed a finger. The Benben stone immediately emitted an unprecedentedly bright light, echoing the increasingly intense sun in the sky. Then it transformed into a streaming light, heading straight towards the direction of the sun. The mortal realm ended. What remained was God's. Cling. Light connected heaven and earth, mixed with various cries. Aaron parried the last guard's weapon with his sword, stabbing into his vitals. Amid heavy panting, Aaron saw the ascended Benben stone and Ramses. Legend had it that this was the Egyptians' gate of heaven, connecting heaven and the mortal realm. Those who passed through it would partake in divine authority. And now the legend seemed to have merged into reality. But Aaron didn't care about that. He strode forward, no one daring to stop him anymore. He walked to where Mes's body lay on the ground, staring at the blood that pooled around him. Hesitating, he finally extended his right hand and grasped the scepter. 3 breaths passed, and nothing happened. So it really is like this. His expression changed, and although he had anticipated this, it was only when the result actually occurred before Aaron that he had to accept this fact. In his hands, the divine scepter was just a wooden stick. The powerful strength it once had was now gone. Swipe. With a sweep of his sword, he decapitated an Egyptian trying to ambush him. Aaron took a deep breath and shouted, "Gather, kill them, and then break through. The Egyptians will not let us go. Only by escaping their encirclement do we stand a chance." He hung the scepter at his waist and lifted Mes's body on his back. With just a thought, Aaron knew where they needed to go. Mes had told him. He had once seen a bush on a mountain, burning without being consumed, and had received a divine revelation in the flames. He wanted to return there to explain the disaster they had encountered to God. "Egypt, I will return. And if I don't, my descendants will." Looking back at the land one last time, Aaron turned and walked away. He did not know how many people could successfully escape from the Egyptians' pursuit. During the chaos, even orders were hard to convey. Hopefully not too few, the dangers along the way were still unknown. In the starry sky, peace prevailed. Unlike chaos's vast and expansive starry sky, Hemenu's was so much smaller. Without countless celestial bodies, only a few stars were the descendants of former celestial gods and earth gods. Here, the sun was the center of everything. Nothing could compare with it. Sitting on his golden throne, with the orb of the day sinking behind his head, yet at its center, a small point of light had appeared. The Benben stone was releasing its power there. After all, it did not possess great destructive power. As one of the first treasures born in the world of Hemenu, it was not designed for destruction. The Oracle Stone tablet could reveal fate and sustain everything, whereas the Benben stone symbolized the source of all creation. Rising from the primordial water, it had brought the world its initial vitality. Therefore, as long as it hung at the back of his head, LA's strength would never fade. It's about time. That side's power has reached a peak once again. The fall of merely 1 or 2 pillar gods is no longer enough to grant me more power from the world, especially as the onslaught from the alien realm is waning, and the outer god seems not in a hurry to reclaim the authority lost upon their fall. LA's designation of the great divine power level was just Lane's own assessment, naturally unknown to La in Hemenu's world. He derived these subjective judgments by summarizing the different extents of greatness among Chaos's strengths, while previously among the Egyptian gods, only La and Apep belonged to this realm, so it was beyond his measurement. But now, with the continuous infusion of power from the 8 primordial spirits, La was gradually developing his own standards. If he combined the 2 corresponding forces among the 8 primordial spirits into one, that would probably be the pinnacle of great divine power. La even suspected that once it reached that point, the unified 8 primordial spirits might possess some higher-level characteristics related to the world's root forces. As for the complete unification of the 8 primordial spirits, it was almost synonymous with Hemenu itself. After all, Hemenu is the literal transliteration of the 8 primordial spirits. The best outcome is that I fully embody the Absolute Void's power and then forcibly control a portion of the primordial water through the Benben stone. Though the likelihood of achieving this is not great, it can only be seen as a goal. A lesser outcome would be inheriting just the Absolute Void, which remains very difficult. But difficult is not impossible. Golden flames blazed fiercely. One moment it was only the sun, and the next, it was the entire starry sky. La reached out, and Hemenu's moon rose from a corner of the starry sky. It stood firm like a shield in front of the sun, many times its size. Thoth was also once the ancient moon god, preferring to walk the earth in the form of a baboon. But he had since lost this authority. La had planned to bestow it upon a suitable new god, but it now seemed unnecessary. It should be destroyed, smashed by the hands of an outer god, because his power was still not sufficient to oppose an outer god. So right before La, Hemenu's silver moon burst like a fragile bubble, effortlessly snuffed out. Hey! Light! With the silver moon and stars shielding him, the heavens and the earth had already been plundered by the outer god. At this moment, after so many years, the god of sun once again exhibited all of his power within the world. Boundless light, boundless heat. The great day was now the center of everything, and all things in the world revolved around it. The lack of various authorities in the world was a loss, but in a way, this also made the sun occupy a larger position in the remaining part of Hemenu. Whether in heaven or the mortal realm, whether on earth or in the void that confined the world-destroying demon gods, at that moment all life saw that bright light, and the sound that followed. Separate. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. Over the primordial water, just as in the beginning. Whether it was Mess death or the retreat of the world's power, neither stirred a ripple in God's heart.